8 o'clock, they kind of take up that spot. So it's, I don't know. I mean, there's times, like over Thanksgiving break, we had family in town, and yeah, parking's an issue. But I spent $30,000 and built a driveway that I could park 5 cars on, so it used to have 2. So, you know, it's...
Just as a point of clarity, you said somebody from Arizona bought the house next to you and turned it into a short-term rental, and it's never been applied. So your preface to that was you don't agree, or you do agree that we should have just local owners?
I don't think, to me, it's just scary thinking about limiting who can own a business in town. I see it as business. You know, the people that own these buildings, many of them don't live in town, the gas stations, you know, who owns Fred Meyer? I mean, I know somebody that owns part of the parking lot at the drugstore, and they live 3 hours south, you know, in some family truck. So, like, to me, it's just this idea that only Newberg is gonna do Newberg good. You know, I mean, yesterday I cleaned 8 city drains in my neighborhood. You know, they weren't in front of any short-term rentals. They were people's homes that blew the leaves out to the road that nobody ever cleaned, you know, and so it's like, I don't know, they could have gone out there with a shovel, but I understand this idea, and you hear it on podcasts, and I listen to a lot of podcasts and all this stuff, that there's these big investment companies are coming into town and buying out. I don't know if that's happening here.
It has happened in my neighborhood. There was a house that was bought by, investment property.
Yeah.
One house.
One that I know of.
And it could, I don't know, is it a local company or is it a big?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have
never
mine
went
through
on
an
the-
LLC, so you'd have to Google to find out who owns it.
Right.
I just do that so that if I get sued or something.
Yeah, so it looks like a corporation or a big business when you're an LLC. That's just a protection for business.
Yeah, your experience is important on all sides. There's a new one that they're considering, and I've gotten, I don't know, probably 5 emails. People are really concerned about the noise, because they live on a very quiet street with lots of kids. It's a brand new neighborhood, and they're very, very concerned.
I mean, we have a sign outside that says our quiet hours.
Oh, okay.
Literally, one of ours is next door.
Okay.
We don't tell people we live there. That's not gonna be online, right? But, I'll tell you that.
So you haven't really, I mean,
Sometimes, if people are, there's been, I mean, we have like 260 reviews, right?
wow.
So that means probably 30 or 40% of people don't ever leave a review. So there's been a lot of people. I mean, probably twice.
Yeah.
At 10:30, we have texted the people and said, hey, the neighbor said it's noisy. And they always go in.
Okay.
It's not.
So the neighbors will text you?
No, I just stay on the.
Well, he's his wife who told him.
Okay.
I
But
mean-
your neighbors could, that's another thing, is what we considered is, if you have a vacation rental, there should be whoever owns it should be a contact.
Oh, I mean, all the neighbors have mine.
Okay, so
Yeah.
they can call you if they are
Oh,
concerned.
yeah, I blow my neighbor's
Yeah,
sidewalk off when I do my yard.
okay.
And the other one,
So you're real,
when nobody's in my house, I just text her and say, hey, you can park there, because the city took their parking away. So,
okay,
she lives next door, so,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like, I try to make it a community,
Good neighbor.
a good neighbor,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right,
Hey, do you
right.
care if I build a fence? Do you
Yeah,
care if
yeah,
I
yeah. You're
hold
very
these weeds?
respectful.
These leaves off your dress.
Yeah, because I don't want to clean them up in the house, is my selfish, but, yeah.
okay,
But again, not everybody's doing that.
yeah,
A lot of these out of town have these companies that manage them.
yeah,
And I mean, I joke around with President of George Fox, because he lives down the road, and we're like, you know, they can't figure out when to take the garbage out or whatever, you know, it's just kind of a joke. It's like a dad joke. Don't park in front of my house, kind of thing.
okay. Thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Coming down.
You don't mind emailing a?
Yeah, I might edit it a little bit.
Sure. Do you want, my card, do you have an email address?
Okay.
then while she's doing that, do we need to approve the November 3rd meeting minutes?
We can certainly move to that if you would like. So for that item 3 for the meeting minutes,
So do we need to make somebody need to make a motion?
someone would need to make a motion and second and vote, unless someone would like any changes to that.
Oh, I see you did mention this is missed testimony, the violation, okay.
Oh, these are
What's that?
from the first.
That was in the supplemental you set down for everyone? Oh, I thought we had included that in the first round. Okay. So, James just reminded me that it looks like those didn't go out in the initial publication, that we put down hard copies when we look around.
Yeah, they're in hard copy.
So, we can either have people have a read-through now, or we can just table that until the next session, if you all would like to do that, and we'll publish them with the next meeting. Have them.
Okay.
I prefer to read them now.
Is this
Okay.
the,
Be done.
is this what they are?
That's right.
Oh,
The
okay.
green headers, those are the,
Yeah, I think I agree.
one of them is for November 3rd, and one of them is for November 13th.
I don't think it'd take long to just look at them.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's back.
Did I get one?
Yep.
Oh. Just in case they have changes, I want to be able to mark it out.
I think they were.
So you're looking for a, motion to approve the November 3rd?
Yes.
You can do both at the same time if you wish. Oh, I thought we were going to do them separately. Haven't got that far yet. My memory is not so good to say I know everything that was said.
I trust Faith. She's good.
I think so. So I'll move to approve both the 3rd and the 13th.
I haven't read the 13th. I can't remember, Don, did you revise your motion to include both?
You did.
I second it.
Okay, I guess, what do I say now? It's
So we-
been moved and seconded?
It's been moved and seconded, and you can go ahead and call for a vote. So we can go on.
Oh, okay. I'll call for a vote. In favor?
Aye.
Like it passes.
Okay. Unanimously? And with that, so for this next agenda item, staff has a presentation available for you all to talk about criteria. Talk about criteria enhancements related to vacation rentals, including Newberg Municipal Code 15.445.330 and other applicable code sections. So James has that up for us. You want to take it away? And so this is following up on what we discussed at the last meeting, which was, there was generally talk about procedures and those sorts of things, and I think everyone came to a relative consensus that we're talking about type 3 versus type 2. There was an interest in a type 2 procedure overall, but then there was additional discussion about wanting to take a closer look at the criteria associated with vacation rentals. And in addition to that, we received a request for information about what it would look like and what the counts would be if there were density-based criteria is getting released. So we have some information in here as well, correct?
Yes.
Take it
And
away.
so how I kind of framed it, if it's how you guys would want to, and I think there it is, two of us kind of run through the presentation and then kind of go through and have you guys not make decisions, but kind of section by section, come to consensus on that topic, move on to the next one, and then, if it's what.
There is some.
Exactly, because
Yeah.
what we don't want to do is start going into the presentation and then stop and talk about just that topic for 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
So we wanted to be able to get through it so that you guys could, so that your committee could see everything. And then we're happy to come back and kind of try and hear our hope is to write stuff down
Okay.
as you kind of make process, but to let you deliberate as you want to. Does that sound good?
Yeah, if we have a question for clarity, that's okay.
Oh,
though.
yeah, absolutely. We just wanted to not just like dive straight down the rabbit hole first off. So,
You think we've been doing that?
it could happen on any number of times. So, thank you. Go ahead.
So kind of in that framework, we've kind of broken kind of the criteria discussion into 4 categories. And as you all make your recommendations, kind of our thought would be to kind of have had thoughts in each category. And those thoughts could be no changes, but just that we've gone through and kind of looked at all 4. So the just overall number of vacation rental homes, the process, so that's type 2 versus type 3, and then that kind of has 2 subcategories. So it's just the criteria itself, so standards, parking, et cetera, and then the geography of where gets a type 2 or where gets a type 3, compliance and enforcement, so the responsibilities of the applicant, and then the city's responsibilities of monitoring, and then finally grandfathering in older existing applications. So again, this map that we've all seen a lot, kind of the conditional light 2 yellows are 1 R2, special uses in the dark yellow and red. And so first off, we'll be looking at kind of that number of units category. And so Alan in GIS put together some projections of what could density limits or things look like. And so to do that, he kind of reduced parcels to where things could be developed. So he took out roads, and then he took out parcels like schools or publicly owned, so parks or that sort of thing. And then you recall the commercial zone has the criteria that it has to be an existing single-family house. So if you look at the red in the zoning map, into the parcels of commercial, those are all parcels that could have a vacation rental. Just kind of note there that a lot of the red goes away just because those are the parcels that have existing single-family houses.
That's what he means by it. It's red, it could,
Yeah.
but it goes away.
And a
Are you
red.
talking about the red downtown?
Well, both.
Both,
Both,
yeah.
yeah.
So you see this blanked out here, and so some that has to do with that single-family home, so whether or not they're appear to be present.
So then Alan took this map on the right, that's all the parcels that could have a vacation rental based on the current thinking, and then he went in and did these projections. So this map is where all the existing ones currently are that we know about, with a 500-foot and a 1,000-foot buffer. So those were 2 of the 4 distances that were sent to us, to kind of frame kind of what's there now. And so if the 1,000-foot buffer was put in place, you know, the largest blue area would be exclusion, new vacation rental homes, essentially.
Ooh, this is hard to, distinguish between the 2 blues.
I have it printed out when we get back.
Oh, good, okay.
So then, and these are very small, but that's,
Yeah.
that's on purpose, so we don't look at it now and we have it printed out. So that's just, these are the 4, but kind of the highlight, at 1,000 feet buffer, the city could accommodate approximately 95 vacation houses.
Total. not
Total.
plus, okay.
And that's approximate, because it depends where you put them and kind of how they are distributed. At a 600-foot buffer, it's 246, 500-foot buffer, 357, and 300-foot buffer is 887.
Do you mind if I jump in? Yeah. This has come up multiple times. Your committee has talked about this, has touched on the buffers and how many would we have theoretically, and that's a little bit, it happened at the planning commission too. So we're just providing theoretical numbers. Is it likely that it would get to full maximum theoretical potential? That's not really likely, but it's meant to give you a ballpark of what it generally would look like. Same with these dot exercises. If we made the dots bigger or smaller, it would make it look different too. So it's really just a ballparking exercise.
These would not include, people who might wanna just rent out a room now and then.
This is not long-term rentals, this would just be short-term
No,
rentals.
I mean like a Airbnb, you rent a room for a weekend in your home.
Home share.
It would be this, it includes those. So this would be any
Okay.
operator, because right now, we don't distinguish.
Okay.
So that's a good question. We don't distinguish between a home share versus another type of vacation rental home.
Okay, so we'll come back here to these. Don't worry. And then this is just a fifth one, so all four of those last maps, whereas if the buffer was the same across the whole city. Then the fifth one that we put here, just to kind of, as another option, is if the R1 zone, so the green, the low density housing was 1,000 feet, then if the medium and high density commercial were 500 feet. So kind of thinking that more dense areas could have more vacation rentals, so just kind of that sort of thing. And so that increases the number to 212 under that scenario. So that's just kind of one way of thinking about it. If you didn't just do a blank 1,000 feet everywhere, you could try and,
Sure. So your committee has the ability to make a recommendation, the city council has the ability to do things by zoning district. Looking at other examples and development standards, depending on what zone you're in, you can have a different building height, you may have a different building setback, because those areas are intended to have different forms or different, things going on. And so that's the point. So they make easy places for us to distinguish between the right place to put a use as well as the right intensity for certain uses. And so that could be, if you look at density-based criteria, it could be distinguishing by zoning district, for example. And those zoning districts obviously are already mapped. So we're not suggesting that you should do this, we're just saying, should you choose to, it's an option.
it doesn't have to be the same buffer for the whole city if you don't want it to. Sorry.
That's right.
Related, but we may wanna discuss it later, so would there be could there be different criteria regarding the rental in a R1 versus an R3, like parking or,
You
I don't know.
you have the ability to modify the criteria based on zoning district.
Okay,
And that's what this is an example of, but you could do that with any number of.
And that already exists in the code for design review. Some commercial zones, some manufacturing, M or industrial.
Industrial.
So certain commercial and industrial standards already have kind of their own little tweaks for certain things for now.
but between R1 and R2, 3, there's not,
You
there
can
aren't a lot
distinguish,
of
you
things.
can distinguish between those two, so I use setbacks as an example, so setbacks and minimum lot size. Those would be fairly common ones, and so if your committee thought that those zoning districts in a higher density neighborhood versus a lower density or medium density neighborhood, that it would be more or less appropriate for them to exist or operate certain ways or under certain standards, you have the ability to do that, and if you wanna take a more nuanced approach.
Okay, so then this slide, we tried to kind of summarize the thoughts that you five submitted to us in the letter, and then provide some options that were in the white paper of just different ideas as well. So the four things that you guys had sent to us were limiting vacation rental homes to no more than 2% of total households. So the data that was with that point was that there's 9,000 approximately households, approximately 180 vacation rental homes. Someone said a minimum of 500 to 600 feet distance to that buffering number. Somebody said the boundary in the R1, so low density, should be higher than for medium and high density. And somebody said that the area near George Fox and downtown should have a high density, but areas outside of that area should allow 100 per square mile. So that would be approximately 580.
What does that look like, if you compared it to?
Can you go back,
100 feet?
back?
So I think, sorry, what was the question, Peg?
Well, X number per square mile, how does that, what does that look like in X number of?
Well, so I think, and I mean, you guys can discuss this later, but I think that might kind of be more on like the cap side of things, instead of saying a density, that's just saying that there's a cap in the whole city. It doesn't matter where they are, but we just have a certain number that we want to have. And so, then kind of looking at some of these other options, there's some citywide caps, there's some sub-area caps. Cities have said, this is an overlay that we want vacation rentals, and that's the cap we're putting there. And there's the density-based, so some have said along corridors, so you could say along 99 or along College, et cetera. One city said no adjacent units, so, finally, one of them said a single unit on a street segment. And then the fourth point there is a limit per owner, so different cities have different limits on how many permits somebody could have.
And this is, as a reminder, these are just highlights.
Yeah.
We know that people gave us more items than this, so we're aware. We just wanted to highlight some of these, especially when some of them between commenters look fairly similar to one another. We're kind of in the same neighborhood. And then, because of some of those through lines, we wanted to be able to show a few alternatives or variations on just the things being talked about as more of a food for thought.
And it is a lot, and I know it's a lot, so we'll have time to kind of zone in on each topic. So then that second bucket is process, so kind of moving away from the number and more what's the process that they go through to get approval. And so the thoughts that you guys submitted were to change kind of the overall process from a type 3 to a type 2, and that it should run with the person, not with the some other practices that we saw were kind of a differentiation between the infrequent, to somebody who might just want to a couple times a year, versus the frequent, somebody who wants to do it on an ongoing basis. Again, by zone, so that's how this city currently does it, where if you're an R1 or R2, type 3, anything else is type 2. By density, so that one kind of merges with the last one, where if you have a house here, you draw a buffer around the house, and if 20% of the lots are vacation rentals, it's a type, less than 20% are type 2, if more, it's a type 3. So that approach looks more case by case, is what I think, kind of, looking at the different options. And then one jurisdiction had that it's generally a type 1, but if there's a standard that an applicant can't meet, they can choose to go to a planning commission and make their case of why it should be permitted.
Already shouldn't be any problem. What's type 1?
Type 1 is staff.
You don't notify the neighbors on a type.
Yeah,
And that's-
it's already a rental, like a renter is renting that house.
But I think also a lot of these would be for new versus a grandfathered in.
No, I mean, a rental house, opposed to a short-term rental.
Okay.
Like, it's kind of a nitpicky thing, like if the house next door to me is a rental, it could become a short-term rental by type 1.
Yeah.
That could be more complicated,
Um,
right?
Yeah, so we'll kind of circle back and
Yeah.
discuss that. And so one thing that we wanted to highlight here is, in the past few meetings, we've been talking about the permit running with the land. And kind of one area that we've seen in the code is that in the conditional use section, so all three of these paragraphs are in that conditional use section. So they may be temporary or permanent. The hearing body, so in this case, the planning commission, shall designate conditions, and one of those conditions is the duration of use. And finally, that any conditional use permit is transferable to subsequent owners unless otherwise provided at the time. So, after seeing this, it seems that the planning commission has been approving them, but they have the authority, if they choose to, impose conditions. So that's one thing to consider, is that, if, you wanted to communicate different things.
And so, part of that I would add is that they have the ability to add that condition, but if you add a condition, it's supposed to fix something. They're not supposed to arbitrarily condition things just because, so you certainly wouldn't want to do it for one and then not do it for the other, partially because you didn't have a reason to do it on this one versus that one. So you're supposed to be consistent with it too. But if something came up, so if there was a neighbor's complaint that I have, concerns and there will be impact on me if this ever gets sold because of, and I don't really know what that means. But if that was something where running with the land would be an impact on them, then they would have the ability to do that. But kind of James is trying to address that run with the land, run with the operator situation that we've talked about now, I guess. I'm saying it's not that weird to have it run with the operator, you have that ability.
And it just seems to be that the staff and planning commission thus far has approved them, just kind of unprecedented as it has, but they have the option. Okay, well, the criteria, so this is kind of gets to like the four standards you have now, so parking, tents or RVs.
Parking spaces. Two parking spaces, no tents or RVs, temporary dwellings, must pay TLP,
Okay.
must post a sign.
The parking spaces are the same for regular residents, though, right?
That's right, so a single family home, which is the only place they're allowed, has the same requirement as.
So there were 5 main comments that you guys submitted. One, that it should have a 90-night rental limit per year, that the owner of the VRH must prove at least 6 months of residence in the city of Newberg, require owners to reside in or within 10 miles at least 6 months of the year, and that a property manager be available when the owners are not residing in Newberg. Allow or require 8-foot fences or shrubs to create a visual barrier between the rental and neighboring properties. And then there was a question about if the city was able to require noise monitoring of some sort. The other practices just also consider, so in that owner proximity, different cities think about it different ways. So there's one that's in miles, it's vehicular miles. There's one that's within the zip code, so it's kind of a different way of measuring closeness. And there's one that's at time, so you have to be there within 60 minutes. So just kind of different options to think about that sort of proximity. Then there's the days of use policy, so limiting the number of rental periods total, or infrequent versus standard, and then doing things by zone again. So one city had where commercial zones you could rent it all year, and in residential it's a certain number of nights. So that's those are just the existing ones that we've talked about before. So we can always come back to that when we have that discussion.
This one at least
You've seen that, but it's here for us to use
The
when
current
we look at it.
Point of clarification, and this might seem like a duh question, but I noticed the 28 days, and there's the 90 days. And is that just the general definition of short-term rental, bringing it to a period of time, as opposed to saying, would you? Yeah, well, in the 90 days.
So I think the 90.
Well, let me finish it. So, let's say we have a person that has a short-term rental, but somebody, house burned up, and they come to him, can I just rent your property for a year? And what I hear is being said is that the only way that could happen is if they stop being a short-term rental, and then.
You want to,
So,
That's a good question.
I think, so I guess first, to answer that scenario, I think even if you have a short-term rental, if somebody just said, I want to rent it for a year, that just turns it into a long-term without requiring any other permit.
So they wouldn't be giving up their status.
Correct.
They'd just be turning it into, and not paying the
Yeah.
city taxes and
it's
other
a
stuff.
different use.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think the intent here was that the 90 days, that 90 total, of which it can be 3-day increments.
Gotcha.
Whereas the one over there is just talking about the increment of time you can rent.
All right, thank you.
And, the reason for a 90-day-a-year limit, this is what some cities are doing, is it just because people don't want short-term renters around all the time?
The why varies from person to person and from operator to operator or jurisdiction to jurisdiction, what they think they're trying to solve and all that. So one of the things I would argue is that how we mentioned the term home share earlier, is they might be looking at some version of that where they've kind of decided that the model they want is for people who mostly live in town but rent it out sometimes, as opposed to those who really are using this house for full-time visitation. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, that's just a stance that someone has taken on those sorts of limitations, because that seems like it would effectively do, if you're limited to 90 days out of the year, that's only 25% of the year approximately. So that's probably not enough to make it a legitimate enterprise.
So if somebody lives in their house and wants to rent out a bedroom to somebody else, why would that be any of our concern?
Short-term or long-term?
If it's shorter,
Only
how many
if it's
days?
short-term, because then you can collect the TLC tax. If it's long-term, you don't get the TLC tax.
Okay, but wouldn't the TLC tax even be significant enough to bother with if they're renting a room out?
So
Depends on what they're renting for.
Oh.
Not. Yeah, I mean, my son paid $500 a month for one
Okay,
room, but that was,
So if that's the standard, if we decide to do that, then that means there's probably people right now renting out rooms to college kids during the school year. How would they not be considered vacation rental by your new standard?
If they're renting it out to a student for longer than 30 days, so if it's a semester, 6 months, and then that's considered a long-term
that's
rental.
a state law. And even in real estate, if, the seller's gonna stay in the house over 30 days after school, it becomes a rental. And they go into a rental contract. So it's the 30 days is the magical.
But if somebody has students at a month at a time, technically that would be.
But I don't know too many students who would call it vacation.
Well, anything over the 30 days is not categorized as short-term
Yeah,
rental or
okay.
vacation rental.
Rental.
And so it's just a completely different use. And so if you're doing it in less than that 30-day increment, it's considered, in Newberg, as we currently have it, it's considered commercial use. It's called a vacation rental home, and you pay TLC on it just like you would if you operated a bed and breakfast, a hotel, or a motel, because it seemed to be a relatively similar commercial use.
And that number is just in the definition, so that is something else that you guys could consider to change if you wanted to make it 60 days, you know.
It's a city
That's
definition.
just, the city
That's how we define
provision of that.
that issue. Definitions for us, when we're making determinations or working with applicants, they make a big difference, because that's a standard.
Sure. Contract law, which is 30 days.
I don't know what contract or whom.
We're not gonna have to
That's
worry
the-
about doing that, so we're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, like, there are some areas, like timelines, that the city has a different standard than the state does,
Oh, okay.
and they both apply.
That's okay.
So like, we
yeah,
could,
it's not that ours is the only one that
yeah,
applies.
and I'm sure the city attorney would have things to say if there was conflict.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I think 30 days makes sense, and in the case of like people who, during COVID, who needed a place to go and work safely and with Wi-Fi, it went over 30, so then it just became a rental. When it went over 30 days, say it did, then it wouldn't be a short-term rental, correct?
It would, yeah, it would be a different sort of thing now. The extent to which we or Airbnb are parsing between those sorts of things, because if you think about it, you remember the main data streams that we work with for that report, or one's a permit, so there's just a permit that allows you to do the activity. If you choose to do something else, you switch to doing a long-term rental, that's your prerogative. And then the other place where we kind of get in touch with people is the business license. That's just permission to operate a business or commercial activity in the city. So that, they don't really care if you start and stop doing short-term versus long-term. But then the TLC tax is what you're required to do, and that's a remittance, and that is part of what you're obligated to do for part of that activity. Now, if someone is using the Airbnb platform, and they're always taking a TLT tax out, I don't know that they turn it on or off, or that
Based on the
how they do
regular
the math, if they've exceeded 31 days, if they've hit 32 days. So I have no idea.
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, for the long-term, long-term rentalers, we don't require a business license unless they have 3 of them under their name. And then you get a name, sales license. We don't practice those.
Right. Yeah, so what would, discuss the Airbnb trigger for receiving the TLT?
Not always. I think when we looked at the TLT report last time, it looked like we do receive some remittances directly from Airbnb, VRB, and others, but not exclusively. So it's a bit of a mixed bag right now.
Yeah.
But it appears that they have the ability to do that. And so that was part of, if you recall, the Venn diagram for the business licenses and the permits, and that we actually have our highest compliance rate out of those 3 streams appears to be with TLT. Then after that, it's permits, and then lowest is business license. So, and some of that has to do with a manual process that's hard, including reminding people. So we're hoping to be able to automate some of those things, make it faster, easier, more consistent.
So now, moving on to compliance and enforcement, and we have a lot, because we spent a lot of time discussing that so far. So the thoughts that you guys sent in were that the rental home broker, the Airbnb broker, can remit the TLT, and that we require the operator to list on the business license which broker they'll be using. That a renewal of the business license should require the operator to provide a report of their rental nights previous year. And that renewal is contingent of an audit of that with the TLT receipts. That for failure to remit taxes at least quarterly is a $5,000 fine for the first offense, $10,000 fine for the second offense, and also a loss of the operating permit. That the city gives the police department access to the addresses and asks them to track complaint calls. That business licenses are to be $250 for 3 years, so currently they're $50 for 1 year. The city utilizes the software that we discussed to track and send notifications. That failure to obtain the business license and run a vacation rental home incurs a steep fine, with different options for what that looks like. And some of the other practices included differentiating between complaint types. So one jurisdiction had immediate, so things that you can call the police for, noise or things like that, versus standard. So if there aren't parking spaces or if somebody's being there longer, so kind of the things that are in code versus just nuisance type complaints. So the nuisance ones would go to the police department, and then the standard ones goes to the city and then the planning commission in that jurisdiction. That repeat violations preclude the ability to apply for a permit if it's revoked. Then one jurisdiction had kind of an escalating scale and also suspension of the permit based on violations.
You said a Newberg business license costs $50 a year,
Yes.
and you wanna charge
Well, just not,
$250 for 3 years?
that was
Yeah,
just
I just checked it out, it's $83.33 a year, if it's for 3 years.
that
So, my
was
question is,
just an
you wanna
idea.
charge more for this particular kind of business?
That was just suggested by the committee members.
I think that has to be legal.
So when we charge a different amount for a home occupation permit, I think it was in that vein of thinking.
So it's a suggestion, and it came from one of the committee members, so we're not basing it on anything, it's just coming from the committee.
And so we also kind of went and looked, since our last conversations about fines, and just wanted to summarize what the actual penalties are. And I think kind of a framing of this is that in talking with code enforcement, there's an emphasis on working with people to resolve it before getting to this. And so I think it sounds like that's why these might not have been as used so far, is that they really try and just kind of resolve it first before getting to fines. But, so land use violations are considered a type 2 infraction, which is to not exceed $500, and each state constitutes a separate violation. Then business licenses are considered type 4, so a little bit lower of an infraction, not to exceed $100, and they are also every day is a violation. And then the penalty for the transient lodging tax is, if you're 10 days late, it's a 10% penalty. If you're 45 days late, it's a 15% penalty plus interest of 5% per month that you're late.
You guys aren't enforcing them.
Which things are we not enforcing?
I don't know any of them. Are you enforcing any?
So,
Transient lodging, we're aware that some people are not paying that,
yeah,
but I guess if you don't know who's
So
not paying, how do you go after?
so, we're not doing, so we are using the complaint-based model.
Yeah.
So if someone complains and brings it to our attention, we pursue it, which is what we do with most of the things across most of the other actions in the city. So right now, we are not doing like a data scraping exercise, which is what I would say would be more of a proactive or enhanced. But we don't do that now, so that's correct.
I think it's just to give you guys an idea of kind of what,
That there
current
are
framework
penalties
looks
in-
like,
Yeah.
as you're kind of thinking about it. And the fact that there's 3 types, also like in theory, means if somebody's not doing one of them, they could, have one penalty, so there's kind of that layered aspect to it as well.
And not to exceed 500 means
For that violation.
for that
So,
violation per
And each day
per
could be a
day.
different
Okay. So it's like if I don't, land use would be
plan.
an issue?
No, that's for their conditional use or
All right, well then,
special use permit.
for every day I don't have my business license, rack up to be
In
thousands,
theory.
thousands.
One of the things that I wanted to mention too, is we did speak with, or at least I spoke with our city attorney briefly, and we do, so one of the things we have in place right now is that if someone does not activate their conditional use permit within, or effectuate it within a year of it being decided, then that goes away. So, but once it's been effectuated, which occurs once they pay that TLC tax primarily, once they have one guest, then we don't have any provisions that clearly say we have the ability to take it away if they do not comply with the provision. So, for example, that leaves us in a weird situation of, well, what happens if they stop paying their TLC tax, even though they started? What happens if they stop getting their business license like they're supposed to? So what remedies do we have for someone who initiated and was compliant but has become uncompliant? So we have a gray area there, because there's a vested interest issue, and the way we read it, we didn't see anything initially that authorized us to say, we are not complying, we're taking it away. There is a provision where if we receive complaints, they get to come to a meeting with the city manager or representative, and then we have remedies to deal with those complaints. But it's more of a nuisance associated.
With the transient lodging tax penalty, 10 days from when they should have paid it,
I think that was what.
not from the day you discovered it there. Okay, thank you.
But from what because when we looked at the spreadsheet last week, they had a penalty column, so I would imagine that finance has their own mechanisms for tracking DLT penalties.
We three are not the experts for that one, because again, if you remember too, we're doing the permitting stuff, they specifically is running a business license program, and then we've got finance running the TLC activities. So there's a bit, and then there's police with enforcement that isn't part of any of those things. And so they're kind of on the outside, they could theoretically be stuck with trying to comply.
Then the last bucket is grandfather, so kind of how our current vacation rentals addressing either new standards or density limits, or kind of how do the existing ones come into play? And those are both ones that are permitted and ones that are not permitted. So the committee's thoughts were to amortize grandfathered STRs, to bring them into compliance by July 1st of next year, and that all existing vacation rental homes are grandfathered in, but they're required to comply with regulations. So I think the intent there was, if we set a hedge limit, new ones would have to comply with hedge limits, but they wouldn't count towards the density base, so they wouldn't count against that mapping exercise, that how close they could be.
But they would have to put in a hedge.
Or whatever standard,
Yeah, no, that was a good
they were, and then some other kind of examples to think about are if a cap or density was put in, one jurisdiction has that, they count towards the cap, but they don't apply to density limitations. And then that jurisdiction also had a waiting list, so, they could be sold or transferred regardless of that waiting list, given the cap, overall. There was one that required that the owner, had paid all their taxes previously, and that was on them to prove that they had been compliant while they were non-conforming. And again, I think to Clay's point, some of the legal issues would have to be, this isn't, that,
When you say taxes, that includes all three of those, the permit fee, CLT, and the land.
The permit fee I wouldn't include as taxes, so I consider the permit fees to be fees, the business licenses to be fees.
I think the point being of that bullet, that jurisdiction just wanted the rental to show that they had been compliant, even though the jurisdiction didn't know they had been compliant. They were paying their things, they had, done the things that they were supposed to do. And then for the, amortization, so, similarly to that second bullet there, so one jurisdiction has, after 5 years, a rental has to come into compliance with parking standards. They must have changed their standards and, given them a window to come into compliance with that. But after 7 years, they had to come into compliance with everything. So all of the new standards.
Might have issue, we've got, what's the problem that we're solving here? I don't know, with that part.
So those are examples of how other jurisdictions have handled
Do
it.
we know that there's rentals out there that don't have proper parking?
Well, so parking is just what that jurisdiction used. And it could be different. If you guys change some standard, then that would be a different standard. But, so parking is just in that jurisdiction, they did change the parking requirement, and so they gave existing rentals 5 years to meet the new standard. So in Newberg, it might not be parking for us. It could be
Well, and one of the things here is compliance can be challenging here, particularly when we try and figure out whether or not someone has a permit or needs a permit. If they were operating prior to 2013 when we adopted the standards, we have grandfathered things in with no amortization period, which means in Newberg, you can continue operating in perpetuity without getting a permit, even though everyone else is required to do that. And that's not necessarily a problem, that's just it. But it can make enforcement confusing, because as staff, we would have to figure out, have you been there preceding 2013 or after, and we don't really know that.
Okay, but how about if the standard is, if they've been paying their TLT, then we consider grandfathering. If they haven't been paying, then let's make them reapply.
If they're paying their transient lodging taxes right now, that's what the standard is. If they're TLC. But what I'm saying is that from an enforcement perspective, unless we investigate it, unless we proactively spend time dealing with it, we have no idea about any of the other things that they're required to do or what have you.
Right.
So, I mean, that could be what the city council and them may decide to do. I think the point here is that if the committee decided to change 10 standards, they could say that a rental has 5 years to come into compliance with 5 of them, and 7 years to come into compliance with all of them. So it's just,
I don't see any reason why we want to do that.
and you have to, I mean, this is just an option of, you don't have to make everybody change everything all at once. You could give different
Well,
grace
if somebody
periods.
applies today, then they have to comply.
Yes, but this is just
So if
for,
they're already out there and they're not paying transit taxes, then we make them apply. If they're already out there and they are paying the TLT, then we make them bring up for the standards.
I think this is largely for, like, physical things. So if you said that,
We don't have a lot of physical requirements.
no, but so the city councilor could make them, and so that's more just like an option. If you,
My fence idea.
Let's talk about the 8-foot fence. Is that even legal in town?
So you could, if you wanted to say that they needed enhanced buffering and screening standards, it'd be kind of like a landscaping standard, but they could theoretically, you'd have to give them a way to do it. Now, do I know that, so, in most areas, in the required setback, which is typically for your interior, something that's not a road, it can only be 6 feet tall.
Right.
So that means they'd have to put it inside of the required setback, and then it could be 8 feet tall, I believe. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure.
But the standard that could be changed here is to say, for vacation rentals in the setback. So,
When in my vacation rental, was higher than my neighbor's, and so my fence, their fence was lower, so everything from my yard is highly visible for them, and hence, the person dangling the child over the fence into their yard. Problem solved, put a fence up. Walking around Texas, all the, fences are 8 feet tall. They're like fortresses, you can't see in them, you don't have dog issues, you don't have issues because nobody's, looking in, listening.
But I'm gonna assume that there's a law against that, there's no place in the state that I know of, do they allow people to fence?
They don't sell these.
Except for other folks.
We have relatively concise standards for residential. Would you guys like me to read it?
Sure.
So, in the residential district, which is anything R1, R2, R3, a fence or wall shall be permitted to be placed on the property line or within the yard setback as follows. A, not to exceed 6 feet in height, located or maintained within the required interior yards. For purposes of fencing, lots that are corner lots or through lots may select one of the street frontages as a front yard, and all other yards shall be considered interior yards, allowing the placement of a 6-foot fence on the property line. In no case may a fence extend into the vision clearance zone as defined by, give the different code section. B, not to exceed 4 feet in height, located within all other front yards. So, if you're outside of those front yard setbacks and interior yard setbacks, with your fence height you want to. But if you're inside an interior yard setback, maximum 6 feet, and if you're in a front yard setback, then it's a maximum of 4 feet.
unless the recommendation was changed, so I think the idea is that could be a change,
Yes.
possibly,
So-
I mean.
So the difference is that, what do you call that, policy? Ordinance?
We just have, it's a development standard, but it's an ordinance.
Okay, so that ordinance was created before short-term rental, before we had an issue, before people complained about what's going on in other people's backyards. That's my point.
Yeah.
If people can't see what's going on back there, they can't be upset. And they're protected, and the neighbor's protected, right? Would you agree with your neighbor? Would it be better to have a high fence that no one can see in or out? I mean, it
She would be much happier with that.
Yeah, I mean, it would protect the short-term rental owner, and it would protect the neighbors. That's
Can I ask
that's the only.
a question? So, you referred to the ones in Texas as fortresses.
Yes.
Was that a good thing, or was that not a good thing?
Well, it depends, I mean.
Well, and I mean that sincerely, I'm just
No,
not sure.
I think privacy is important for all of us living in, not that we live in a downtown urban, but privacy is important, and I think, that just keeping things private and giving people the option, telling the short-term rental owners, you may have less complaints if you choose to build this tall fence, that kind of thing. So, it's an option to try and alleviate the complaint process of what your neighbor has gone through and what Dawn has gone through, and even what we've gone through.
Kind of protects both sides.
It's a business.
Much as, just another barrier, another
Yes,
opportunity to protect.
to protect that, what was the word they used? The livability.
Yeah.
The livability.
So, I think the reason that we went through all of these in a row is to highlight that, if we had kind of stuck on process and changed criteria, like, these things don't happen in a vacuum. So changing the process has an impact of changing the compliance. And so it's important to kind of think about these 4 buckets impact each other. So, there's like, anything else that you had? So just kind of to think about that, they're all kind of a network of policies.
Yeah, they're supposed to work together and to address different things.
Yeah.
And so, at the last meeting, we talked mostly about procedures, how someone applies for it and what they're required to do. But it seemed like that opened the door to what wants to, or what should or needs to happen with some of the things used to regulate. The ones we have now are relatively clear and objective. But by making the procedure, we've lowered the barrier to entry. That could be a good thing, but one of the things that is not necessarily addressed, and your committee can decide to do or deal with that however you want, is it doesn't really address a lot of the public comments that are mostly expressing concern in some way. They're either typically expressing opposition or expressing concern or speculating about something bad happening. So that's what it seemed like in looking at some of these various options, whether it's about density, number and capacity, whether it's about kind of the compliance and enforcement aspect of what can be done, whether it's about amortization, whether it's about other standards, things like buffering and screening and privacy. So it kind of, to me, is what problems potentially need solving is kind of what we wanted to present this. So at this point, we tried to put a couple of things in that presentation to give you some food for thought. James has obviously mocked something up, so if you wanted to throw ideas kind of on an idea board, kind of a situation, then we can do that. But it's really your committee's decision on how to discuss these, or to just move straight into the other item and do your action plan. So you can do that how you choose. We're also available to help you put goalposts on that so you cover the bases you want to. Previously, you all had talked about having tonight's meeting be the last meeting. I don't know if that's reasonable or not. It seemed like you were talking about packing a lot into one meeting, my perspective.
I don't see how that's going to happen. I had hoped,
And we haven't even talked about your comment amongst yourselves. It's just our picking highlights and through lines where we thought.
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea to frame our action plan suggestions in these 4 areas for starters of the
Inspiration board.
inspiration.
It's organization.
So the handout that I just passed around is each category, the slide that had your thoughts on it and other thoughts. And so, one way that we can kind of do it is go section by section. And then given, there's a lot, Slade brought his, timer clock, if you wanted to put a 10-minute.
I use this to hold people accountable in meetings when I know we're gonna run over.
Fair enough.
We don't take it, let's do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever.
Oh,
good idea.
who's gonna, okay.
We have one extra area here,
could-
one area that's not up there.
I would do like you said, like you suggested, go one at a time.
So we,
So,
You're looking for
so I think,
suggestions on the numbers.
so first we have the number. So we can kind of take 10 or 15 minutes and think about what you guys suggested, think about the other options, and kind of try and come to some sort of consensus of what you would want a recommendation be for that number question.
So, if we've got to come to consensus on a number of things, because when we put it there, that's what we're gonna recommend to the council. Is that my understanding?
Things can come up, I mean, this is just like a board to write things down, and then hopefully by the time we're done, across the 4, you'll see the ideas you've had, and can kind of see them in context of the whole package.
Right.
To the extent that you want us to get involved, you want us helping act like facilitators, we can do that. You want to talk amongst yourselves, and try and dial it all in, and then just tell us what you feel like you came up with, we can sit back and let you do that, so.
We could do a combination.
But we,
Say it again.
We could do a combination of that.
Maybe, yes.
Talk
So
amongst
we're-
ourselves and then look at
we
it.
want to help without being oppressive.
Well, you guys have knowledge that we don't.
You wanna fill in his boxes there,
right.
talk about the numbers.
The lessons.
So, I want to get a feeling
Oh, I
from,
guess, oh, I'm sorry.
from everybody, so that I'm thinking in line with everybody here. When we recommend something in there, and this is my question, are we just giving that as a
Let's use,
brainstorming
yeah,
thought.
let's use it as an idea board.
All right.
And then we take things off or enhance
Gotcha.
them as we go,
Yeah, that works. Thank you.
not to be controlling.
No, but any one of the three are good for me. All right, so do we want to go around, or how do we want to?
Let's let Robin go through the procedure.
Okay, so the number of vacation rentals, okay, our thoughts, so I guess we can go by bullet point, what you guys think, okay, limit the rentals to no more, so this is essentially a cap, to no more than 2% of the household. So that would be 183 total. What do you guys think about that? Putting a cap on it. Do we want this? Somebody suggested it, right?
I just asked you for what they should do, and that's.
Do you guys want a
What kind
cap?
of-
Well,
what kind
I'm
of cap?
processing that question because in essence, each one of them becomes a cap in a different form.
Yes, right on the cap.
Yeah, each one creates a cap. The question is each one of them distributes that cap differently across the city. And so to do just a percentage, I'm a little uncomfortable with that. It's ambiguous.
Well, why don't we start with, do we want a cap?
Well, I agree with Don that each one of these creates a cap.
Yes. And I think, Bill, we've established that.
Do we need to limit the
Yeah.
number that we have in our town? I personally don't, because I'm a very strong advocate for property owners' rights. I mean, I have a right as a citizen to be able to do what he's doing and, you know,
Yeah.
have as many homes as I want,
Right.
because that's my right as an American citizen. So when government gets involved, it limits my right to earn money in that way. And I started our whole meeting that way.
Okay, so this is a no on this first bullet point.
Well, we're bad, I mean.
Okay, anybody
We
else?
need to try to come up with a consensus.
Mike, I have a thought, I think it's still there.
Well, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Don, I might.
Well, so if I may suggest, Robin, if we moved on to the second question with that?
The minimum 500, 600-foot distance. This will, I mean, I'll just be honest, this is a lot of, what you gave was a lot.
It is.
It is.
This is a lot.
We may not get through all of this.
Okay.
We're not gonna get, I gotta leave at
This is
7.
gonna take me a while just to process.
And I think,
Um,
so, also notice kind of what we put in the presentation, it was kind of based off of possibly being one meeting. So I mean, with you guys, space, yeah, so,
This can always be continued to a future meeting. Just roll all this forward. And the other part of this is it can also be rolled forward into, because the only other thing you have is the action item. That's the only other kind of contemplation, or the action plan discussion, which this is fairly directly related to. So, we can also copy down things that are no-nos. So we can basically write it in here with strike-throughs, or you guys can kind of do voting exercises on taking a temperature on it. So it's really up to you. How to approach it.
I did have a feeling, though, that we kind of rolled past something that Beth was saying, and I don't want to leave that alone, because I felt that it was an
Don't worry
important
about that.
statement.
Ask the group, do they want a cap? Already got one person that said, no, she doesn't think
so
there should
no
be.
cap.
But
But
Don,
any of these
But she's not making a
creates a
decision
cap.
for everybody, we need a consensus.
But any of these creates a cap,
Sure, but
essentially.
let's see if we
So-
need a cap first, and then we can talk about what kind
Yeah,
of.
so the top one, do we want to put a 2% cap? Okay, so no.
Can we hold on, Don is
Well,
trying to do.
I thought that was an important point, because that ideology is felt within the community. It's my property, I should do as I want. And then the other contrasting opinion for that is the idea that these shouldn't exist at all. And so I think by going through this, we really do find that nice medium line between, the different interests of the community. And I think what is being suggested now is how do we establish that by looking at each one of these different points. And that way, it really allows for, how do I say it? Nobody wins 100%, but both sides should be satisfied. And for me, in being on this committee, it was the biggest part is to be able to say, how do we meet everybody's needs?
Can I make a suggestion here? everybody in this room probably at this point knows whether or not they want a cap. They probably have a good idea what cap they want. So
Right.
rather than go through them item by item, let's start with the big picture. Do you want a cap? One person says no, let's see what the other people say.
I'm a no.
And then if they do want a cap, then we can discuss what kind of cap we want, rather than,
That's-
it's gonna take a
that's
long
what-
time to go through each item and say yes or no, and they will conflict.
And that's what I'm attempting to do. I'm more of doing a method of consultation as opposed to a just
Okay.
raise of a hand. That doesn't work through the ideas at all. That just simply pits us against each other,
I
which
think
gets us nowhere.
when we said a 500-foot rule, you know, that looks easy to say, but now we have
Yeah,
all
visual.
these, and I asked you to come up with the visual, but now it's like, this is gonna take just, this is a,
So let us ask this, so that was part of the reason we came up with this, so
yes.
multiple people in their comments seem to be supportive of the density-based buffer, which is a form of cap. So, but we don't know because it's the first time that you've seen these maps and these exercises, and one of the things you can see with the buffers, if you look at the hard copy, so for example, when you take the one that's got the biggest bubble, like this,
Excited?
and
Everything's.
those are ones where you can see that there's those buffers, those are based on ones that already exist, correct?
Yeah.
So there's already overlap.
Yeah.
So if you chose something like this as a policy, then you'd have to say, well, what happens if some are already there and they already overlap?
Yeah, I don't
Is
like
that a problem?
Well-
Would they be allowed to continue and be non-conforming?
He wouldn't even be allowed to run his business anymore. Gentlemen who gave public comment.
If it's,
Michael.
but if you had a policy where it's allowed to continue as a non-conforming use,
Mm-hmm.
then because it's a vested right,
Yeah.
then that's fine, then you don't tank that one. So that's one way of dealing with that. The other thing that we wanted to point out is, on the one that shows the pink, as well as the other one, the kind of the existing conditions, but with some buffers, that in the past, what I've heard from this group, as well as the planning commission, is the observation that there's more of it near downtown, and there's less in the outer areas. So, an overall cap is gonna do something different than a density-based cap. And that's if a cap is selected, which we don't currently have. So that's kind of also the existing condition. Existing condition now, no cap. But we were starting to get in the planning commission hearings, I will tell you, neighbors who feel put upon because they have in some areas, like down around Second, Third, and Fourth Streets, where they say, I've got 3 neighbors within a block in any given direction that all have vacation rentals. And weren't there because they were thrilled about it. So I don't know for sure that it's a problem needs solving, but it is one that we've heard about from the public. So that doesn't mean it's a problem, but it's one of those things, too. Some of the comments are kind of speculative. They think it will be a problem. It's concerning for them.
Right. What could happen? They don't know the unknown, and that's always scary.
It is scary.
So,
But we haven't gotten a whole lot of complaints that have come in through us, and I did see in some of the comments, and that may have been one of yours, that we make an easier process by which someone can voice a complaint about those activities, and I think it may have been one from David that was about making a complaint process that does not have to go through the police. So we could do one where it comes in and it goes to both planning and the police, the holders of the people who administer the permit and the ones who do the enforcement. So we can make it if there's like an online system, so that doesn't require a policy, that's just an operational thing. We can try and do that for people, but that also assumes people can find it. So,
and once again, we get a neighbor like I had who complained about the garbage can sitting out for more than 2 days. I mean, I could have done that being at home. You know,
right.
I could have been sick or whatever, you know, so. Or unreasonable. I don't know how you safeguard against that.
Go ahead.
I think some people are bigger worriers,
Yeah.
less happency, and those are the people coming to the meetings. Doesn't mean some of them haven't had bad experiences, but their voice is louder than their population. It's not proportionate. So I haven't seen any numbers that make me think we need to start really creating a lot of new rules and regulations for these rentals. we grandfather in the ones that are already there. I don't know if it's 500 or 600, I would be fine with either one. We would still get a cap, obviously, and the chart shows that it's pretty darn generous, 246 for 600, 357 for 500 for the whole city. And we're pretty, I mean, we're about a quarter of the way there right now, it's 75, halfway accurate.
I'm just gonna write options and then you guys can take them.
And
Thank you.
I would concur with that as well. My personal preference would be to see 800. But if the committee is leaning towards the 500 and because the 2% is just unclear to me how that would apply. But the other one is more manageable.
Yeah.
And it does allow for the city to grow and for those numbers to grow.
I'm thinking like he said, the bookings are down. You know, I think Beth agrees with this, not imposing a density cap, but letting the market decide perhaps. You know, if people are making money, they're not gonna do it.
Turn them into rentals.
So I, at this point, I don't know that I feel comfortable doing, I was before, now I don't think I am. And basically what I am hearing are the people that are afraid when they're coming into their neighborhood. They're very, very, very afraid, and making sure they have the tools if there is an issue to complain about them. I think that's the main thing, is the worry. Is there gonna be parties? Is there gonna be drugs and alcohol? People are more afraid. It seems like, and once they're in there doesn't seem to be, and we have proof of this with the police, there doesn't seem to be issues. We need to empower the neighbors, educate and empower them. This is what you do. But right now, with all this information, I don't know that I'm comfortable putting
Well, I think density.
I guess, in all honesty, I thought we were kinda had to, because I've never wanted it, but kinda got caught up in the ideas of how to
I mean, if
create a density.
I think there is a couple other considerations that should be done here, though. Number one, I know that my neighbor, who's actually has them, she truly could have registered, at least in the last 2 years, a good 8 to 10 complaints.
Richard, what?
8 to 10 complaints, legitimate complaints from the Airbnb that she lives next to.
people just won't do it.
But she chose not to, but that's, because they are choosing not to, doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't have foresight in there. That's what I've seen this committee to do, is kind of examine what the growth of the community will be and try to set some sort of, concept forward that will allow the city, number one, to make sure we have availability of, homes for people coming in, buying and renting. And, number two, to make sure that whole question of livability. And again, the idea of, putting some sort of cap on these, or, dysregulation helps us maintain two things. Helps maintain the business aspect of the community for this, and also, by doing this with actually three things. By doing this with enough foresight, it creates livability, and I think it also sets a standard for both sides of this question as a win-win, as opposed to a win-lose. If we just say, don't do anything, the people who really want the city to do something, they are not gonna be happy. And if you totally eliminate them, the people who want them are not gonna be happy. So in many ways, I see us here as trying to, get a consensus of what will satisfy all the needs here. This isn't really about me, what I want, because if I had my way, there wouldn't be any of them. But it's not about me. It really is about what we think can create the best atmosphere for the community. And I think we have an opportunity here to do that, and I would feel very sad if we walked away from that opportunity.
I want to revise my comment about the buffer, the density. I would go with 500 because it's not as stringent. I don't know what 500 feet looks like from one house to another. Is it one per block?
That's about a block and a half.
Well, I'm noticing right here, if you did
Yeah,
500
which one?
in the, downtown area,
Yes.
you already are over density, or probably half of the homes are in that area that would be over density from now on.
Right, and my,
So that would not change until those
right,
left in rentals, there would be no more BBR.
we
As-
grandfather the ones that are too dense
Yeah.
until they change hands and there's a chance to,
I get that, but I'm saying that what you would do is you would eliminate any new BBRs in that whole section of downtown, the most desirable section that people want for BBRs.
I agree.
By putting that on there. I mean, I don't know what problem we're trying to solve by putting a density requirement on them, because, yeah, I know that there's a perception that some people think that there's too many of them out there, but I'm not sure that they're right. I've seen no evidence of that in the research that I've done. So,
The market.
you know,
would take
certainly this area down here, if you put any density requirements on there at all, they're done. There's no more BVRs.
in that area.
Now, up north, the areas that you're complaining about,
Yeah.
people can put them up there, but I suspect the reason they're not up there is because that's not where vacationers wanna come to rent the houses.
Closer to the
So,
downtown.
I mean, it seemed to me that the best way to deal with density is let the market work it out.
They're not around the Gulf Coast,
Is there any, do you have any fear that there will be too many houses at
right?
some point?
They're not around the
And
Gulf
they
Coast.
get rentals?
Yeah.
Like,
I thought, I mean, it's green,
Right.
Right.
You're right.
But they're bigger houses too, probably bigger mortgage payments, bigger, like, smaller ones, but a lot of couples just come to Newberg and walk downtown, and, I mean, I look in the garbage, so like, I mean, it's like, they eat out of box, they not tax, people spend a lot of money downtown.
Yeah.
Sure, they're on vacation.
So that's the question, I mean, what problem are we trying to solve? And I don't see a
The
problem.
problem we're trying to solve is making the people who could
Yeah.
keep coming and complaining feel comfortable that something is being done.
But I think the way to solve that is if one does go in and they have issues, they need to
Absolutely.
be empowered, they need to know where to go and feel that they are okay to do that. Because like he said, like my neighbor said, they don't wanna complain. So,
I think we need to be careful in judging community in a narrow way, that they just are a narrow view of, comfort and et cetera. As the mayor, I'll put you on the spot for a minute, you do represent more than just a narrow constituency, and you realize that, and thus being able to listen to the, various, voices out there. Certainly, anybody who's in public service
So I'm
realizes,
just here because
if
I
I can-
listen to voices.
if I can just finish for a second, if, one person comes forward, they really represent about 10, because it takes that effort to get up and go forward. And I am not trying to negate anything that is being said there. What I'm really trying to say is I think we have an opportunity here to create an environment by which we can still have these grow in reasonable ways, because there are many towns who have waited too long, and then it is moving out of their control. We've seen how many have come in the amount of time that we are trying to establish an answer here. And we still aren't done. We've got probably 2 or 3 more meetings. So I just think this is an opportunity that we shouldn't just go, let's just leave it alone, and then come back in 2 years and go, crap, we should have done something to set a standard.
Well, we have the past 10 years to see what the growth has been. So,
I think kind of thinking about all 4 categories here, and kind of how they work with each other. I think some people might think a buffer solves problems because it makes it further away. but if you guys consider different criteria, that might mean that buffer isn't necessary if the criteria address the issue. So I think, I mean, you can think about kind of how criteria make it, so you want somebody next to you.
The criteria,
So, like,
so if you want someone next to you,
well, so,
By,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
like, I think a buffer can seem like an easy answer of just pushing it further away, so it limits noise, it limits X, Y, Z. If you guys put in certain criteria, that might address those issues to where they could be 100 feet away. So I think, like, we can also jump over to the criteria section, and then if you guys have 4 things, that might make you all think, oh, if these are in place, we don't need a buffer anymore.
Interesting thought.
Could we maybe take a quick break?
you like?
Yeah, I think we should take a quick break for 5 minutes.
All right.
I need to go to the bathroom. Thank you. Okay, so back to this, do we want to do the 500? I think we need to wrap it up. Do we want to put a cap?
Can I ask a question? Do we think coming over to criteria will answer those questions?
Criteria.
I
For
don't know.
now, we should do this,
Maybe-
and then we may come back
Oh.
and go, oh, we don't need it.
You're saying you want to finish the numbers? Okay.
I changed my mind, I don't want a cap, I don't want density either.
I'm thinking no right now. Now, we can change this.
Sure.
Right? Okay, so I'm thinking no, no,
I would like one.
yes. So how do we, okay, so right now we're,
Or no, one,
okay,
one,
you're not, okay, so,
Three months and one.
okay, so right now we're not just gonna do a cap. Okay, process. The committee thought, do we want to change the permitting process from a 3 to a 2? But Clay, you mentioned there was an issue that we may have overlooked with changing it from a 3 to a 2.
That was just the general one associated with criteria, where you kind of lower the barrier to entry, so you've kind of taken it from you go to a public hearing procedure to all being a type 2, which is just a little easier, and that's not a bad thing. But in the prior discussion, it had been, because we've made it easier, but we've been receiving these public comments in the past,
Oh,
perhaps we're gonna revisit criteria.
So the public, they can still submit comments, it just won't be in an open meeting.
It would just be written, and if they submit a written comment, then they have the ability, they still have standing, they can do anything like appeal and whatnot. So it's still, there's still an availability.
Okay. I think,
James.
I'm ready to blame the virtual environment.
okay, what do you guys think? I think you guys were in support of it.
I think a type 2 makes sense, because unless the criteria is changed, then that's.
It would help out the planning commission,
Yeah, I think
it's a waste of their
It's a
time.
waste of their time, basically, because
Okay.
they don't have to respond. Are we there's nothing to respond.
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree.
Oh, wait, what?
Unanimous.
Oh, okay, so we do want to change it from a type 3 to a type 2.
Okay?
Okay,
And it should run with the person, not the land.
Oh, I agree.
I am in support of changing that as well. So if you have a permit, but you sell your house,
So,
the
Well,
new
let's
buyer
talk
has
about
to
criteria.
we're still on process.
Should run with the person, not the land.
I agree. Should run with the person.
I think so, because the next person may not want to do it.
Right.
when you say.
But then is that a selling point?
When you say person, do you mean owner or applicant? Okay.
Owner.
When would the owner have to be different?
I don't know, but I think it could.
Okay, so which should we choose?
I don't know.
You could make it, we probably have to parse it out, so if we got direction from city council, and we could evaluate that and come back to it, but I would tend to think that it belongs to so, would there be a situation where an owner allows someone else to request a vacation rental, and it goes to the applicant who applied for it? Now, the owner would always have to sign off on the application. We don't accept applications without the owner signing it.
So maybe like an older person who's in a nursing home, still have their faculties, but the children are running the house,
for example.
for example.
So in that case, it would run with the, so it would be a question of, does it run with the owner of the land, or does it run with the operator of the,
Run with
thing?
both of them?
Huh?
Owner.
Owner, and
I mean, we could say or, and then they could opt into it.
Sounds like what you described is an exception, so generally, the owner sells it, then somebody wants to use it as vacation rental, they get to go apply for it.
Correct.
Okay.
But he's also saying, owner or applicant. Applicant, someone like a granddaughter may be living in the house and grandma's in a nursing home.
They would have to have
And
a power of attorney or something like that.
It's already permitted for vacation rental, so she could go ahead and use it that way.
No granddaughter decides, I want to rent out a room in here, so I'm gonna apply. I'm living here,
Oh, you mean it hadn't been a vacation
So,
rental?
my main concern is if we use the term owner, then it excludes another person. It excludes the ability of an applicant to have the.
I think it needs to be the owner. I can see where this could go wrong. Like a
I also
child
think,
could be living there and they're, oh, let's rent it out, and then
So they can't do that. We only accept applications if the owner has signed off on it. So they don't have the ability to do it, and it's why it's one of the reasons we require title reports.
So
So it's
therefore,
not just their word for it.
since the owner has to sign off, why not just say owner?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we wanna change it. We wanna change that. Okay, that,
Okay.
okay.
Are there any cases that you would want it to go to CUP? Because right now, the majority go to CUP because of the zoning. But are there any cases that you think it's worth, and
Wait.
those okay?
Hold on, we haven't gotten to that yet.
Well, that's where changing them all to type 2 makes them all staff with the director's opinion.
yes.
And that's fine, but just, if there's any special conditions that you think
Which is what?
near a school, for instance, but that's just because of what I've heard in my own hearings, but that doesn't have to be it, but just before, I mean, and saying all of them is okay,
Okay.
but it's just worth thinking about, are they, and that's,
We don't,
Great.
we
They
allow
still-
homeless camps near our school,
they
no
still
one
have
cares
a-
about kids.
They still have an appeal process.
I think maybe this is part of what you're getting to. They're currently allowed in certain zoning districts as either a type 2 or a type 3. Are we suggesting changing, restricting, or adding to where they can be done? So right now, they can't be done in,
Commercial downtown, and
they can be done in those areas. They can't be done in industrial.
but I'm not thinking that, I'm just thinking
your map excluded in Second Street and,
that,
First Street and,
that's because the
Some of that is based
criteria,
on housing type, like existing structures.
that's because,
I'm sorry?
Sorry. Some of that was based on what existing structures are on the property. They don't,
So if somebody builds on the Butler property, and has apartments on the top, they could use them for VDR? Why not?
because we only allow them in single-family homes.
Yeah.
That's the definition of a.
Okay, so
existing.
there's an example of something that we might want to revisit.
The definition is one that could be
Because
reasonable.
I know that there's a proposal, there's a couple people interested in purchasing the Butler property, and, one of the things that they intend to do is have residential units on the top floor. And would we want to allow them to have ADRs?
And that
You
was,
know, is there any reason we want to exclude them?
You're saying
And-
it has to be a home already?
yeah, that's what.
So, a single-family dwelling, they are not allowed in apartment complexes, they're not allowed in duplexes, they're not allowed in triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, or accessory dwelling units.
I say we put ADUs.
but the quirk for downtown is that in all the yellow residential, you can build a house, a single-family house, and then rent it out. In all the red, it has to already be existing, and you can't build it to rent it out. And that's why all the red went away.
That's how it should be.
Well,
Why?
So we couldn't have vacation condos on the Butler property.
I think it should be.
Well, first of all, I don't, like,
I'm
vacation,
just speculating.
yeah,
But why wouldn't we make that type 3? Allow them to apply under type 3 approval?
so if it's kind of a criteria by dwelling type, so
Let's
if it's
just say a
single.
developer wants to develop his property and he feels it's critical, then he'd be able to put VDROs. So let's make that a type 3 use in that, what do you call it, a the non-residential buildings in the commercial zone.
So we could do something like that. The way that I would suggest it would not necessarily be through that zoning district, because it's already an allowed use, that's where the use lies, but it's based on the building type.
Right.
So you could change some of the language that James is noting, but it'd probably be cleaner to do it under special use permit criteria and say, in circumstances where it's a single-family home, it's a type 2. In circumstances where it's something else, like an apartment building, then you say that it is processed as under a type 3 procedure.
And then under type 3 criteria, does it fit?
Well, that's,
The
if you decide that you want different criteria for that building structure,
Well, no, I
then
mean,
that structure, that's just the procedure.
I know, but right now, to get a, short-term rental, it has to be a single family. So where do we change the criteria that allows different types of houses?
So that's a change in the definition of a vacation rental home.
Okay, where's that at?
Literally the definition, so it's section 15.100.050.
So that,
In the,
Be more specific.
It's really close to the top.
so that is, so we need to change that
Yeah, if we,
to accommodate.
Well, we don't wanna just blanket say, let's do it, because we might decide that we don't want those to be vacation rentals. I'm just saying that if the developer comes, we should have the option to,
so,
I
have
don't
the
know,
option to
I
make a
think,
case.
I think we need to preference just vacation rental. I know that there's a housing
Well, these are,
shortage.
yeah, these would never be home.
They would, I would have,
private, it's private property.
So
so
here's
we
a
can't
question,
sell.
Bill.
but somebody would have to own those. What I'm saying is they could buy them as a single-family home, and then they could, but I don't think they should be designated as a vacation.
I don't think that's what anybody's saying.
That's what I think you thought you guys were saying.
No, I don't.
Want them
I
specifically
know
designated.
I know in at least one case, one proposal I've heard, they wanna have commercial, we have to have commercial in the commercial zone on the bottom.
Yeah,
So they wanna have things like tasting rooms, restaurants. And to make this work, they want to have something on the top floor that's residential, but they feel
I
that,
want them designated as short-term rental.
yeah.
Do they want them designated?
Yes.
Or do they
What's
just
I'm
want,
asking?
or do they just want them to be residential?
They're just.
They're gonna be an apartment.
Pretty sure they're, that in this case, they were talking about doing that. I don't know if that's critical to their plan. I mean, this is all preliminary now, it's
Right.
Yeah.
So one thing that would be available there, I mean, to me, that actually sounds largely like a motel or hotel that's just self-entry. So that still wouldn't be precluded from downtown. They could use the structure or a part of the structure to do something like that. But whether,
Motel, and they don't.
yeah, so that's where the definitions, it's like, well, it would just be, the interpretation could be, if you have multiple, like, let's say it's one, if it's a building and it's one or more floors, then those floors are just part of the uses included in it. And so how they choose to operate it.
If you had all the units have one or two
Yeah,
bedrooms,
good.
does it still,
Okay.
could be a
That
hotel?
makes sense.
Yeah, sure does.
Doesn't matter to me if they have a hotel that's got
In
more than
Europe,
one
they're
bedroom
like
and a
that.
suite.
That's what we stay in.
We can move on, that's the one thing I could think of.
So, down the street, there's apartments above all these places. Are those allowed to be used?
Vacation rentals, no, they can be used as motels.
But if they were, yeah.
They can be-
If they're, I mean, there's probably more to it, but I'd have to go look at those standards, it's kind of a different thing, but,
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, just a use, and we allow it in this zone.
Yeah.
So was that gonna require us to change, that we need to rethink type
No.
2 versus?
Let's just say we
Okay.
want those kind of places to be included, you guys figure out how to make that happen.
I mean, that's actually, that kind of direction's actually fine.
Yes,
You-
I'm sure it is.
This case does not have to get fully baked, so staff's still gonna get direction from the city council.
Yeah, yeah,
Do whatever we think that we're being told to do,
yeah.
and then come back with something at the end of the process.
And in my opinion, ADUs should be included, because they're kind of the perfect thing, but they don't fit the criteria because they probably don't have 2 parking spots.
That as well as they're not a single-family home.
Yeah.
So that would be one.
So that's
And
why,
then I'll just reiterate, I'm gonna put my community development hat on and say, that is ideal low to moderate income housing for rentals in the city. And so, as a professional planner, I'm not particularly supportive of accessory dwelling units being used for vacation rental homes, but I understand exactly where you're coming from, because as an income generator for a resident, it makes complete sense. So I'm just saying that my perspective, wanting to see housing available for residents, I'm not particularly supportive, but you are welcome to make, as your commission and your opinion.
But the deal with those ADUs is they're gonna rent for less money. They're gonna be
Which,
affordable.
rental or short-term?
Short-term or rental. You know, they'll probably rent for less money, so
Than a
maybe
house.
somebody would choose to stay there.
Okay, let's get back. There's
But can you
many
rent,
nuances.
can you rent ADUs out right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like renting a room in your house.
But not a vacation rental.
Yeah, long-term,
Long-term.
More than a
Yeah.
month. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, but I still think they should be short-term.
What, are we on?
It's okay.
That's my opinion.
I'm sorry to get your business.
No, that's fine. I got my opinion.
Okay, so
All
moving
about
on
the
to
money.
criteria on the other page. Okay, so the 90 night rental limit per year. Okay, now that's, yeah, does that mean continuous? Like if somebody's
No,
house,
90 days per year,
so
Cumulative.
cumulative,
not
thank-
consecutive.
It could be 9 to 10-day stretches,
okay,
but
but,
it couldn't be any
Or
longer.
91-day stretch.
It could be
Or
29-day stretches.
No, not 30 days.
Are we counting
20
nights or are we counting days?
Nice, apparently.
okay, I'm not in support of that.
Me neither.
I don't understand why it would even be.
So 90, yeah.
You guys, you're not,
Yeah.
Okay, owner of a vacation rental must prove at least 6 months of residence in Newberg. I guess I'm not in support of that. Oh, Dawn, your input, are you,
On the 90, no, that doesn't make any sense.
So we're unanimous on that? The owner, I was gonna say maybe, or operator.
prove at least 6 months of residence? Are we trying to eliminate people just coming in here and buying homes?
In big investment companies,
Yeah,
I think is where we're
so-
going with that.
Are we wanting to keep Beth saying no? Prove at least 6 months.
We don't even know how many we have.
Usually all the people that I'm seeing at the planning commission, they lived here.
The owners.
Yeah, I haven't seen any that have just come in and bought up the house. They're all, although the one in my neighborhood is, but everybody that I've seen was a Newberg resident. They're just, so I don't, well, no. And, okay, so require owners to reside in or within 10 miles at least 6 months of the year. I don't know. Or require 8-foot fences. No, we can't even get, those aren't, we can't do those.
We could make a,
In the back we can.
we would have to look at, so if,
Look at the
if your commission chooses that this is something that you want to require or want to allow, then we could try and evaluate it. Now, it would kind of beg the question, why allow it for these and not others?
What do you mean?
So if you think that enhanced privacy is needed, not just for vacation rental operators, but for everybody,
Okay.
then you could consider a standard where that's just a change to the standard.
Okay.
Well, and
If I put
also,
an 8-foot wall around my property, I'd never have to mow my grass or pick up beer bottles.
but also,
Okay, that's a good point.
where that gets down to,
He does not live like that. I've been in.
I hear what you're
his-
saying.
That's what I'm saying, I figured whatever log yard in town was.
You better, this guy is recording tonight.
Don?
well, it also creates the problem, if it goes back to being just a residence, then we have to have them change their,
So like her house, it already started out with everybody like that. So now if we're just doing hit or miss, it just looks kind of silly. Okay, no.
That's what it costs.
I don't know. Is the city able to require noise monitoring? How would this noise monitoring work and what would the hours be? We already have a noise ordinance.
So this would be something that's required of the owner to,
The little.
to have some kind of a
To run,
instrument.
yeah, a decibel meter.
But how
within the
would
home.
you, and would they notice that they're high, or do you know remotely that they're too loud?
They're an app, you would
I think
know
this is
remotely.
silly.
It's a way to make people comfortable that nothing's going on. So you're not addressing the issue that is at hand. The public is complaining about
We have ways for them to, if it's too loud.
possible noise, possible parties, possible drugs, la la la.
So nothing on the criteria.
Yeah, so that worries me.
Was, who, remember who the noise monitoring comment came from?
Me.
Oh, okay. Was it intended for monitoring in the home, or that, like, if we did an enforcement response, that they're not supposed to have more than X decibels property line, or something?
They provided a noise monitor so that if it got out of hand, the management company could contact the guests and say, stop, and you're done, or whatever, get out, or whatever. So it's a peace of mind issue, tool for the public, knowing that it is super micro.
Yeah, I think that would be
But
All you gotta do
way
is
uncomfortable.
put it
and
in a weird spot where
I think it's
no one's near
overkill.
community.
Overkill, yeah,
Okay.
okay,
We probably have noise ordinances.
we do.
we do.
We do, we have nuisance ordinances, so that would be what people complain about, if it's, but that's at the
Well,
property line, but that's who you're worried about.
we didn't address in our criteria, I mean, so remember, I believe we're looking for solutions to help the public who have voiced concerns
Yes.
to feel confident that their neighborhoods and their livability is not being destroyed. So what are we going to put in place to help accommodate those things? So one thing we did talk about that's not on the list is, sending the letter out and a notice so that everybody has your contact information or your management contact information. Is that a criteria that has to be changed or added or addressed?
We,
Are we also
if
Yeah, I like
that, because there was, I think more than one person had said something along those lines with an annual neighbor notification.
Yes.
That, am I remembering that right? So, that would be kind of, so it does create a challenge from administration feasibility, because like, how do we know it's happening, or is it the city that does it?
Affidavit like we do not for notice.
We could.
Not
Would
very
you-
many people, because it's just the adjacent.
We could just do it once after.
Any, well,
Here's the thought I have in my little peep, right? I would think that it'd be nice to have some sort of posting on the property, preferably could be viewed from the public area, that would say, if there's a problem with this property, call this number, among other things. Is that doable?
We talked about that, but then we thought it may be
Targeting.
a deterrent or discrimination, the house of faith discrimination.
I think we
Why
also.
don't we make it a requirement of this particular
Yeah, but if
use?
you're selling a house next door and there's a big flashy sign that says we're a VRBO,
Okay, small sign, but-
whatever,
yeah.
if it's out there, it could deter the purchase of it.
when, so just this past Thanksgiving,
really-
we happened to stay in an Airbnb, and they appeared to have that requirement.
The
And it
outside.
was just, on the outside, it was just hanging from the front porch, it wasn't big, particularly big and flashy, it was like a wooden sign with the name on it, and had a registration number of some sort on it.
Yeah,
Matt, if you sold a piece of property and the neighbor next door was a VBR and you didn't disclose that,
nope, not a material defect of the home. I only have to disclose material
they,
defects.
they'd be having
No. Buyer
signs.
beware.
So you think letting them know that it would deter something?
It could, I mean,
I don't think that's compelling enough. I think that buyers should do due diligence.
I think if I was gonna buy a home, I'd wanna know that that house next door is a VBR.
yeah.
It wouldn't bother me like some people,
So, Bill, when you say that, why would you wanna know? Is there a perceived impact there?
Good question.
From my professional opinion, I don't really wanna see that. I thought it was a great idea.
As a realtor.
I thought it was a great idea originally, but, then I was like, no, I don't think we need.
One deterrent for it that I see is that here's a sign being posted that tells people this house is empty quite often. And
Oh.
with our ideas of vagrants wandering around,
That is
it
true.
becomes an invitation either for wandering kids or anybody else.
That is a good
That says,
point.
unlike when my lights are off at the house and my cars are there, people who are gonna enter, are gonna know somebody's there. That sign says the lights are off, no cars there. I like the idea.
Good point, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
but
good
I,
point,
but I do like the idea of having something somewhere that,
Well,
because if you send me an envelope, I may not keep it in a place, and then when I want it, I can't find it.
So the man,
Yes,
I have a suggestion, we already have a map with all our, rentals on it. We can make it where we can create it to where they have information, so when you click on it, the information of the homeowner, person running it comes up, and they can get that information from here, which can be updated yearly through the business license process.
How's the public gonna know about it?
Well, it would just be something that we say, do you wanna know, business licenses in your neighborhood, or something like that, that they would have to go on our website, but we are getting a new website, which could hopefully make everybody's life easier for the public and ours on finding.
I heard Michael,
That's a good idea.
I mean, it's burdensome to do a letter every year, right, to everybody within that whatever radius. If the first time the new rental home owner let everybody know, then they could include, hey, here's info, here's on the
Yeah.
city website, here's how
upon
you do it.
approval of the permit, then
Yeah.
you guys could send a mailer saying, hey, this is
yeah,
what
so
you need to
a
know.
combination of the two, a letter and the website.
So are we saying the city does a notification annually or first time, or what do you mean?
Well, I'd say at least first time, I mean,
The city,
yep, they've already got the addresses because they sent you notification. of-
We didn't send a notification.
Application.
The applicant does.
Yeah,
Application.
that's
Oh,
what the
okay.
owner-
Okay.
And just so you know the quantity, so if we're looking at approximately 74 operators right now, when we do a 500-foot notification, if I see anything under 30, I assume they missed some. So it is typically in the range of about 40 to 60 plus.
So you wanna have the homeowner do it.
for me,
Well, it's just the scale, so it's just, the city's potentially taking on workload. It's the same reason it would make sense for the city to do public noticing, because we do have GIS folks here to do it, but it would occupy time. We do
Okay.
hundreds of projects.
I
maybe,
don't
or
believe we
lots.
need to send a letter to all 500 people that we did for the type 3 permit. I believe it needs to just be the adjacent properties who might be bothered by activities going on.
And then, with that, since the question is, how do we monitor it, that, and maybe you do it the first time, and then you always do it the first of the year, and then they are required to send notice to the city that they have sent that. That would be an easy way to monitor it. That way it's
They
done
need to do it
annually,
every year.
they,
Yeah, maybe,
let the
maybe
city-
every 3 years when our business license.
or something about annual basis.
Yeah.
That way, if the residents around have turned over or whatever it might be, then they still have the option of having that information there, so they, if there is a problem.
Would that be too big of a burden for the city to
No, that's,
verify that they mailed them out, the required notices?
No, we could basically create an online form so they could, or we could create a process by which they notify us. I would say that if it is on a cycle related to something else they're required to do, as opposed to this is on a, so for example, the business license cycle is on a 3-year cycle, and this one's on a 1-year cycle. The idea that you have some things happening together, or that you make it so that, did you do your annual notification happen when they're required to do the business license? We just do a special business license for vacation rentals. That to me creates a bit of a pathway.
yeah,
A pathway, so that I follow.
Whatever the pathway is.
Annual.
makes sense.
If it's an annual, did we say it's, and, or we moved it to the adjacent property owner's notification?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that that's too much to ask the business owner.
Correct.
but is that
Yeah, that's
superfluous? So this is mainly for noise, right? Or just,
Any,
Well, this is so that they're reminded who they are to call if they have an issue.
they should, this should be like any other person in your neighborhood. Even if the neighbor next to me is causing noise, I'm still gonna do the same thing, no matter who it is. Just because it's a rental does not mean they need to be notified every year. If there's any sort of complaint, I'm still gonna do the same thing no matter what, so.
well, the only difference can be in there is that you can be complaining about your neighbor, and they're
It's
not
gonna be
gonna lose their right to be in that residence. The Airbnbs and vacation rentals, if they receive enough violations, my understanding is,
That's gonna be
they
under
can-
compliance, so we need to talk
yeah.
about that, under
Yeah.
compliance. I don't think sending out notices every year,
Well,
that's,
I disagree.
The other part of that is, if you do it just at the start, at the time the permit's issued, if you do it annually, then if the adjacent neighbor moves or changes over, then they continue to get notified. So that does seem like one benefit, but, I mean, you're not wrong in that it's extra work, and I doubt anyone wants to do it, but also if it's the adjacent neighbors, they can theoretically hand deliver that. It's not like you're having to do 60 or 70.
oh,
So,
okay.
that does change it a
How
bit.
would we know, I mean, adjacent is way different than that requirement for
Right,
that.
Yeah.
So,
It's
wouldn't be the
going out 4 or 5 houses,
As
Yeah.
far as the how do we know, like right now, if somebody applies, they send an affidavit that they did do it. It's like, we don't go and check every door as planners and say, did you get the mailer? Did you get the mailer? So, you know, a mechanism could just be a similar affidavit instead of a manual.
That's why I think that if we attach it to the business license, and there's an affidavit where they can say, get my business license, and I am assuring that I did it the way that I.
Or even just a checkbox.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
an
You
affirmation.
need just the people right
Yep,
on
Touching
board
your
side.
property.
Yeah.
yeah, if they have a property line they share with you, then they get notified.
How long are we gonna go?
Oh, great.
We do not have to do this today, tonight.
Oh, we're having
So,
fun.
we do wanna wrap it up. We could basically table the remaining, we could continue this item, continue the remaining items, so that they flow into each other the next time, if you would like.
You wanna go next Thursday for the next meeting?
No, he
We
needs 2
need,
weeks.
we need 2 weeks so we can get public notice out.
2 weeks?
Yes.
I thought it was just 7 days.
Well, I need,
Time to get it ready.
so if I do it, so I'm not gonna be able to get your agenda together tomorrow.
Slave driver.
Okay,
So,
I
that's
guess
what
I
we
would-
talked about before. I just wanted 2 weeks between meetings. It makes a big difference for staff. Sure.
okay, I guess I thought we would just be discussing this. If there's something else.
Do you
Will
wanna
be a
just finish?
continuation. There's some,
I'm here,
I'm good to finish.
15
Yeah.
minutes, let's
What's
get
that?
to it.
I'm good to finish.
yeah, let's see how far we can
Let's see
get.
how far we can get.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Just
fine.
with this,
Because I won't be able to make the next,
I won't be back till.
Okay, so basically, what you're saying is, when the house is approved, the new operator will hand people right around it, and then the next year, they will have to go.
No, every 3 years with their business license, we ask.
Well, that's if you do the 3 years.
Huh?
It's every year.
Right now, it's every year.
Every year.
Every year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was an idea.
I thought you said that we.
that was a proposed one.
Yeah, that, so when they renew their license, so then when they do that to get their license, they'll have to show a letter that they've.
Check it,
Check them out.
We would just make it part of the same form, so they can do it together.
Okay, what do you guys?
I
Yes or
think
no?
that works.
I like
yes.
that.
Every year upon approval, and then every year thereafter.
Or whatever the license, if
Yeah,
we
whatever
change
they
it,
want.
yeah, just in case we change that
Okay.
cycle.
Yeah, so it's in sync.
Okay. And this is with the owner's name, the phone number, what to do if there's a complaint, that sort of thing.
Correct, contact information.
Yeah, whoever
Even if the
operates-
place is burning down, it doesn't hurt to have that, them.
Even the, just who to contact if there's an issue going on there.
So no sign.
No, and it would also then protect if suddenly it's supposed to be empty and there's lights on there, it gives a place, it does a lot of different services.
Okay, so compliance and enforcement, okay, so a broker, okay, Airbnb, okay, collect and remit TLT, okay, require a short-term renter operator to list on the business license application the broker that they will be using.
Yes.
I like that too.
Yes.
And that's so we can go to them and try to collect the TLT. What if they don't use a broker?
I think
Well, they say self.
I think that sub-bullet, though, is tied to, like, the idea that Airbnb collects the tax to the city.
That's so you know, so you can go
So
out
that,
and
yeah, so that if there's a reason, we then can go look at the application and say, they use Airbnb.
Yep.
Yeah.
If they're self, then
They would list themselves.
They just,
you'll have to, you won't, okay.
Well, that's something that you guys discussed last meeting, I think, so it's just another decision to take on board.
Independent or simple, right? You do everything yourself.
Right, but
So-
I wish the city would just allow Airbnb to accept.
So you
And then I don't
rent
have to
through
deal with
Airbnb.
Airbnb would just pay you guys,
Oh,
all these houses. The
Okay.
state of Oregon gets all this tax money right now from every one of these off Airbnb, but the city's not.
So the state is collecting them and not remitting it back to the city?
no, they're,
Not for
they're
Oregon.
Yeah.
different.
There are some cities.
It's automatic, so if the city contacted Airbnb, is how I understand it, said, hey, there is a requirement for tax to be paid. They would do it on their end and send the money to us.
Oh, yeah.
But I was told
Remember, that's what
2
I'm-
years ago,
that's
that
what
the
I'm-
city didn't have a way to track who was paying, but I don't know if it matters. I don't keep track of who pays on Airbnb, is that on recording? I mean, they just give me checks, it's not per visit, sometimes they wait 3 people.
You're right, right.
So that's the bullet point we need to put in here, that we
So-
need to hold
Well, I think-
Airbnb responsible.
We
When
talked
we
about
looked at,
software.
at the spreadsheet last time, if I recall correctly, it had an Airbnb and then addresses under the Airbnb category of who submitted, like, who Airbnb paid for.
We would just require that people who go through this process, that we collect at a different place. And if they say self, we could probably accommodate that. But typically, we would just say that it's required to be collected at the broker level rather than the operator level. So we'd have to figure that out, but if that's something this committee wants to make as a recommendation, because you prefer it, and the city council decides to pick that up, we can work on it. If we find that there are
That's gonna have to be done.
quirks that we have to figure out, then staff can do that as part of the project, and get that direction.
That's gonna have to be done by ordinance so that we can enforce it.
Yeah, exactly. So, and staff would have to make sure that it gets ironed out properly, and that it's, is it truly feasible? Do we have the authority to do it? But
And
you all don't have to, we don't have to have that nailed
Right.
to that.
Okay.
But if you
Just
like
say
the
we want
idea,
it collected.
then we can do
Yes.
that.
Okay, renewal of business license should require operator to provide a report on their rental rights,
Nice.
rental nights. Previous, okay, I guess not, because we decided not to do the 90-day thing, so why?
And if we're getting
This
a,
is so that they can help with the audit, so we can make sure they're paying for each night that they're renting.
Well, if we
If he
get,
tells you he's rented 100 nights, but you only paid for 70, then you say,
but if we're going through Airbnb, okay, so
you're not always going to Airbnb. Won't make continue to do it.
I wonder how many people self-operate.
so maybe that one should apply just to people who are not using a broker.
Can we require a broker?
I mean,
Well, Airbnb could give you that report
Right.
without any trouble.
Right. That's why I don't think we need it, but you're saying if there are some who are doing it themselves, we won't know without the
And
audit.
that's what I'm saying, do we?
so is it supposed to be an annual audit and verification process?
Well, I didn't put this on here, but I'm sure.
Okay, so the self-operators, you would wanna see that perhaps.
We want to make sure that, so, I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what this is going for and what things we're making sure jive. So
I
we
think it's to show that they paid all the TLTs that they were supposed to.
If they're self-operating.
Can I ask you a question? How would a self-operator advertise their property if not through VRBO or Airbnb?
So if you have like Lifestyle Properties or iTrip,
Yeah.
those are two local companies.
I use iTrip,
So potentially, you can book off their website.
right.
So they potentially need to collect, that would be somebody that would need, maybe, I don't know if they have an automatic thing to this.
They do, they paid mine,
Okay, so,
I verified that.
you know, so does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always gonna be some sort of
You can have a
agent.
homeowner who has their own website, there is a movement to do that, to try to control the broker fees. I don't wanna deal with that, like, it's too much. We only use one platform.
So most people people, I think, are gonna use the platform. So maybe this is a very small portion,
So
so maybe this is.
we don't need to make them self-report then, because.
Yeah, this is not, no.
Okay,
Failure to remit taxes at least quarterly.
well, this is a moot point.
Now, I wanna know who come up with these numbers,
I
because
do.
you're harsh.
I am. Well, because that's the only way business owners are gonna stay in compliance, is if you hit them in the pocketbook,
It's painful.
Yeah,
right?
you sure are.
And so, if you're obeying, you're not gonna get hurt at all.
What are, I mean, I would be curious to see what the average remittance is.
So if we're,
So-
if 90% of our renters are using a broker,
Yeah,
we don't even need
we don't even need that.
Well, it's still a good idea to
Because-
have it in there.
Okay, that's good.
Because there'll be somebody that slipped through the cracks, and then we'll have to go back and modify.
How are
Okay.
we gonna find them?
And I think that's part of been the question, isn't it, is that many of them that are out there are not in compliance. Matter of fact, 3/4, my numbers are right.
When we write that ordinance, which is gonna hold the brokers, we're gonna have the same number in there. That's what they're like.
That's true.
Numbers, I
That's
don't.
true. No, I didn't, yeah.
I don't know.
I think those are harsh, but I like the idea.
Well, I mean,
I could live with 2 and 5 instead of 5 and 10, but that's probably not that much for VRBO or Airbnb.
right?
For the first offense,
Don't offend, don't offend.
Okay,
It's
so we wanna
motivation.
go with 2005
Am
now?
I brutal? I don't know.
I could go either way. I just want them to be in compliance.
Okay, let's
If they're
just
gonna do the
do
business,
2,000
yeah.
for first offense.
if we have a more reasonable fee, then we're more likely to be able to collect it when we need to.
True.
Okay, that's true.
Okay.
You couldn't charge me $10,000 right now.
I know, you get blood out of
Blood
it.
out of it, sure enough, yeah.
Okay, so give NDPD access to short-term rental addresses and ask to track complaint calls. This is a software thing that we're talking about.
We'd have to talk to them about exactly how it works, but we can make sure that if this is part of the recommendation, we can make sure it's in the scope of work if that's the direction we get from city council.
I would like that.
And if it's not part of a code amendment, that's fine, it's just part of our operations, that's okay.
Okay.
They'll
I
work
think
on
we
it.
just need to see really what, if there's a problem, how big it is.
Do you want it yearly, or should we put a timeframe?
When they have had 2 calls to a certain house, yeah, I think they should, if they, yeah, I would like to have that.
Should have
What's that?
track
What?
complaint calls.
Yeah, I would like them.
Give the police department access to short-term rental addresses and ask to track complaint calls. Okay, so when do you want this report? What are you gonna do with the report?
Well, if they get, yeah, how would that work?
Well, you could say,
We could allow, we maybe don't involve them, but when we send out that letter every year, say, you know, complaint, I don't know,
we
we
could
could,
do it monthly. I mean, this is just, it's a report. Then we can see if we've got 2 complaints.
How much manpower is monthly?
I don't know, I guess I see
Maybe the software
it,
could show for each address
Wait,
how
yeah,
many
so what-
complaints there have been.
So if we were to invest in a software, we could potentially do that. Right now, it's if you get 2 complaints, you get to have a date with the city manager who determines whether or not you get a penalty,
With
including
no
revocation or suspension.
And no, they're not police department complaints, those are city complaints.
Those are supposed to be city complaints, but typically any complaint like that would go to code compliance. But so, right now, I think we may have a disconnect, because police doesn't know which ones are vacation rentals, and frankly, they don't care that much, they just care about the complaints and they want to address them.
I,
And then we care because we permitted the activity, so we would like to know, but the complaints don't normally come to us, we're not the traditional place.
But this report would solve that.
but how do we,
So,
okay, we can put it down and then do that.
so is
We'll
it,
have to figure out
is it
how.
provide the police department with a vacation rental registry and track complaint calls, or is there a certain
I don't
reporting
think the
department?
police want to do that. I don't think that they need to have that on their plate. But why not use the See-Click-Fix app as one source to complain? And then also, when we send out that, when the homeowner sends out that letter, list a phone number, whatever phone number we decide is you
A
decide.
complaint line?
A complaint.
And I guess the homeowner would just have to keep track.
Well, if the
If homeowners complained a couple times, or if they've seen the police go over there a couple times, the homeowner would have to know.
Now you've got neighbors, police.
They already are.
Part of
Well,
the empowerment.
If it's, I mean, if it's an emergency, they're gonna call 911. But the police aren't tracking now because
because they don't know what houses are BVR,
Yeah, so maybe not,
nor do they wish to.
They don't have a tool for it right now, so
Yeah.
it's not really an option on wish or not. I mean, I don't think we have a desire to make it any harder for them to do their typical job.
okay, then no.
But if we had a way, so if there's a report being discussed and we wanted to start, because even the analysis that was just done, when we found there were a very limited number of the total complaints that the police department gets over the year, that they occurred at the homes, when we looked at them, it didn't look like they were nuisance calls associated with typical vacation rental activities. I think one was for a large dog, one was for a small dog, some were behavioral health incidents,
Yeah.
so they were really not related to it, it's health issues. One was being self-reported by the owner because they had concerns about the tenant. So they had some other things, but it really didn't seem to be,
Okay, so this
it didn't seem to be a problem that needs solving.
Right, okay, then that's not.
Yeah.
But there are other things like, whoever said something like a complaint line, that could be part of the annual notification process. So that could be added as contact information, city complaint line. So,
Website, something that you could go on and fill out, that'd be kind of cool.
we did
You
complaint line.
can do all kinds of closing.
And certainly we can use the Sequent Fix app to, that's one possible way to do that.
Now, I've gotten a little lost here, so I'm asking a clarification question for this.
Yeah.
So are we looking for, on the letter, I know where we are,
Yeah.
but are we looking for the letter that goes out to have a number on there that, of course, notifies the owners that there's a problem, and then, I thought I heard somewhere in there saying a number that we can go to say, there has been a complaint registered at this residence. I thought I heard both of
I
them.
think, I think you heard
Um,
that there's a phone number to make a complaint.
Yes, that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
on that letter.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's where,
Yeah.
yeah, how to complain.
Interestingly,
You
if
have that,
they,
did you write that down?
if they contact the owner,
So many ideas.
if they contact the owner about their complaint, the owner's not gonna tell the city.
Exactly.
That's
Fine,
right.
as long as they handle it.
Well, I mean, I hope they contact the owner and tell them I have a problem and let them fix it.
Yep.
But if they don't, then I hope the next call.
Yeah.
Well, but I think there's a way of, we've created an anomaly, in a sense, by allowing these into the R1, R2 neighborhoods. They are a business, they are in essence, no matter what name you wanna call them by, they're a mini motel. And so, we're allowing the neighbors to be able to still have some control over their world, and we're allowing this company, this business to work. So it's a way of working together, it's a way of keeping the owner attentive of their property. The one that is in our neighborhood, the owner has at least three in there and lives outside of town and has a management. Well, that's fine, but I want to be able to say, well, if they screwed up, I want the city to know that's at strike one. So, this works as the best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah.
I think it'll give people confidence
So
that they're
business,
being heard.
yeah, okay, so business licenses are $250 for 3 years, but Faye said they were 83 a
Per year.
year,
If you multiply that, divide 250 by 3, it's 83.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, right now, the business license is $50.
We can,
I don't know
we
why
can
we
just
do.
make it a separate one.
Oh.
Let's just figure out the fee now.
Yeah.
Or that doesn't, I don't know if that seems,
We just need to title it something else and make it not a business license, and we can charge it up rate.
I mean, it's a kind of a tax, you know, so I don't know why we need to raise it. Or at least if it's gonna go for 3 years, let's make it
I would, what we had talked about previously was that the annual notification could be tied to the annual business license process, so that we have that pathway. I'm not saying from a staffing perspective, we necessarily need to make it more expensive annually. I'm saying it gives us something to attach it to, so the homeowner's not being heavy.
How often, so the question becomes, how often do we want to require them to get a license, and therefore notify the neighbors?
I think it should be the same, once a year, same price.
Do the businesses down here all do once a year?
Yeah,
Okay.
once a year,
That's-
same
And
price.
they're getting similar treatment, and what I think the incidental thing will be is that because it's a compliance item associated with the neighbor notification that they know they have to do, that the business license compliance will also go up dramatically because it's very low risk.
Right.
Yeah,
That's why I like to tie it together.
Okay.
So that we don't have to go chase people around, they'll chase themselves around, because they'll be doing the thing they're supposed to.
But we can do that without raising it.
yeah.
Why do you not wanna read
Any taxes.
license to run it?
Well,
Not a
everybody else
taxes.
is saying is $50 a year. You wanna charge
Do the
more for
business
this?
down here do 50?
Right now.
Everybody's
Yeah.
50?
Who has a different business?
The only ones that pay a different fee are people who are working, have a business from home, like they have an office at home that they work out of. They have to go through a type 1 application, a $200 fee for one time. But then after that, it's $25 a year. And that's because they're working from home.
Everything else is 50?
Everything else is 50. And if someone has multiple locations, so say it's, a red box stuff, they have to pay for every location. Yep, so every location has that license, that way we can track where the location, where things are. But if someone has multiple vacation rentals, they pay for each vacation.
Okay, so city utilize software to track license holders and send automatic renewal notification. Yeah,
You want us to say yes to that, correct?
I like that.
I mean,
Software?
yeah.
Do you have the
I mean, part of it, we're staff, even if you don't make this recommendation,
You're
staff
gonna get
will
it.
probably say, this will likely help compliance.
Yes, we want
These are the
compliance.
things we heard, so,
Yes.
if you don't bring it up, staff probably will say, we would like the tools to do our job better.
Yeah, we want compliance. A failure to obtain a business license and run a BRH incurs a steep fine to be determined by cost to collect double what projected revenue would be for an example.
Yes, and it's, sure they comply.
But
Wow.
wouldn't that be in addition to the fine that we already agreed on?
They don't pay
So
their
you
taxes.
remit taxes at
Yeah.
least quarterly?
This is if they don't get a business license.
Oh.
Is there any penalties for not? I see that.
I think
Yeah.
typically,
Yeah. So it's
there could be.
500?
Up to 100 per
That's
day.
200 per day.
So I
There's
think,
already a penalty, so we don't need to
I don't
worry
think
about
we need to
that.
add $100 a day.
We saw that as the last slide.
so we have this in place already.
Yes.
Okay, so,
And it's actually pretty steep, 100 per day.
That
But
is
we ha-
cheap.
Get in
It
the
gets
compliance.
go up real fast.
Yeah.
have we been doing,
Oh, they have not been.
we haven't been doing
It
this.
is lost revenue.
Haven't
It's
been-
like a business.
So the software would help do this.
There's a reason businesses don't run government, they don't make money,
What?
and they make money.
The cities?
Like museums, parks and things like that.
Okay, grandfathering, amortized grandfathered short-term rentals to bring them into compliance by July 1st. Can you please, so the grandfathering, that just means they've been operating prior to 2013, and they're not, they didn't have to follow.
Grandfathering is a term that means they can continue doing it without getting any permits or coming into compliance. But
Grandfathering means they don't, or?
they don't have to do anything.
They're grandfathered.
They don't have to go get a permit, they don't have to agree to the terms.
Okay, the amortization means we do.
They do
want-
have to within a certain period of time.
Okay, that's what,
Now, you
Yeah,
would have the ability, should you choose to, when they amortize, to decide what standards do they need to come, if there are certain standards that they still continue to be exempt from, they could be considered non-conforming. So there's some ways we can do this, but the big thing for staff is, if they are currently operating, do you want them to continue to be able to operate? If so, you want them to get the required permits and take the typical steps within a certain period of time, or do they just get to keep doing it?
yeah,
I say amortize.
yes.
6 months looks like it might be a little aggressive.
What were the steps that they would have to go through so we could be realistic?
Does anyone get to?
Well, right now, it'd be a type 2.
It's type 2.
So how long does that take?
It could take, kind of based on our typical statutory timelines, it could take up to 150 days. No. Yeah. 150 days.
And appeals up to one.
If it's, I'm going under a type 2. Oh, you're right.
So 2 months, okay.
Because our local requirements are basically state requirements.
State,
So
more
So,
generous.
and if
So it should
everybody
be
tries to
90.
make compliance all at once,
90 days.
Well,
As soon as you get us the stuff, we have.
Okay, so 90 days to get a permit, so then the license they could obtain.
Well, you're saying they get a permit in 90 days from the time they apply, under type 2?
Under type 2.
If they get complete and everything goes.
Now, that
Is that-
means that when we deem them incomplete because they gave us bad application, they immediately gave us everything we needed,
Yeah.
right.
which is not usually how it works.
So, I personally would give them 60 or 90 days to apply for the permits, and then let them operate it during the process.
So,
Providing they're
from an administration perspective, let's say, how many permits do we have permits that are operating under permits right now? Is it
Under permits?
64 out of the 74?
Something like that.
Okay, so to the best of our knowledge, there's approximately 10 to 20 that are out of compliance with the permitting requirements.
With the city permits, you mean?
We don't know how many of those are grandfathered, right?
I think once we require BBRO to apply, you're gonna find out there's a lot more than just a can.
So what I want is for people to get in compliance. If it's 90 days or a couple of months, it does not make a big difference to me. When I've seen amortization periods, they're often for things, that we expect it will be hard for people or they're not used to it or something like that. So they tend to be long because you want everyone to get there, not to go deeper underground and try and continue avoiding you. So you can make it whatever you want. 6 months is probably gonna be real short because we have to do whatever we have to do with the project and come back.
Yeah.
So 1 year?
But a year to me would be reasonable, even 2 years would not be unreasonable. It would be fine. You assume that they're not doing it right now, and if we don't do anything, they're not gonna change. But to me, a year's okay.
1 year, we could start.
But to make it 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, that feels potentially tight for people who might not know, because I don't know when they're gonna get the message that you
So,
do this.
if you give me a year, if I'm not in compliance, I'm not paying my transit tax, and you give me a year to comply, I might just go ahead and write out the next year, collect my tax, and at the end of the time say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna apply.
Or,
And shut down.
with that, I
So,
think there's no incentive.
I would prefer to give them a certain, 60 or 90 days to apply, and then a year to
Come into compliance.
but make it clear that they have to start paying the TLT.
And I think to apply within is an easy standard for us to do, because we'll have a date on that.
Yeah.
And that's under direct control. Whereas to get a permit, some people struggle with the permit process because they're trying to do it themselves, or all sorts of things.
Yeah, I'd give them plenty of time, but I wanna start getting the tax right away. I don't want them to run it out for a year and then still not pay us.
So what happens to somebody who misses the period? Do they get the permit?
Who misses what?
Misses
Deadline.
their period to get them back into compliance.
They start over.
So
They
they
no
get
longer have a rental, and if they wanna apply, they can apply.
But do they get to keep running their,
No.
how
Not
do
if
you
they
shut
miss
them
the
down?
amortization
How do you
period.
shut them down?
They get an unfriendly letter from the city.
Oh, and then what?
They get a visit from a code enforcement officer,
And then what?
and then they get civil fines.
And then, okay.
So we do have penalties
Okay.
for operating a business.
That's not $500, but for the land use permit,
Okay,
it's the $500.
yeah.
Okay, so we're giving them,
Start with an unfriendly letter. Stern.
so we're giving them a certain amount of time.
What?
We're giving them a certain amount of time to apply, 90 days, and then another, what? 9 months to
One
get,
year, you said a year sufficient, he said even 2 years.
what else do they need to do?
Depends on the.
Well, it depends on where you wanna, if coming into compliance is applying for the permit, or if it is getting the permit, or if it is getting the permit, getting a business license, and effectuating a permit. So there's different places you can put the finish line for them, and then it's up to you all on how long long you wanna give them, how long is that window for us to adopt an ordinance, have a window by which they can hear about this, where we would probably, I would imagine, send out press releases, try and make it so we make a reasonably good faith effort that people have been noticed, and we can say, you, that we let the operators that we know of in record, basically probably the brokers, know that there's been a change, and they should notify that there are people that are doing the operation. So we could take some good faith efforts on our own. And so that's not things we need to put in here, but just so you all know, that's what I would expect them to do.
And the truth is, we're doing them a favor by not trying to charge them the $5,000 fence fee,
Hey,
you know, which we probably couldn't anyway, because if they're not licensed, they're not under the program. It seems like an easy way to
Yeah,
do
does,
it.
you,
Okay, so
does
what
the
is
city have any enforcement over
I thought we
somebody
put the
who's
fees
not
in.
licensed?
I think we said 12 months.
Or
So we're not gonna
no
do.
compliance officer, civil fine.
Yeah.
Wanna do
Okay, I got
They really don't.
I think they apply within 60 days.
Apply within 60 days?
Apply.
Apply.
So we
And start paying their fees immediately. You know, that's the DMV.
So wait, apply means the city puts out a notice, hey, you need to come into all our, we're giving you 6 months, and that's the permitting process?
We could do it as an and, so it could be required amortization compliance within, required amortization, including application within 60 days, and obtaining, or effectuating a permit. Effectuating is when they start occupying.
Approval.
Could say approval of a permit within, you give them a much longer window, because at that point they're in the pipeline, you gave them lots of
You
time.
tell us what that number
So a
should be.
year for an
That's your
approval.
Well, I think what's there is, the year to come to effectuate is for conditional uses. Type twos don't have a year requirement to,
Well, but he's,
Oh, that's right, you looked at that the
But-
other day.
we're also operating on the assumption that some of them may have issues that don't allow them to get the type two right away.
That's
So
what I
that's why we're
was
giving
thinking,
them a year, so that you guys have
the
a chance
parking,
to
what
work
are,
with them and see where we're gonna compromise.
so like if they don't have the off-street parking, what are the other, so
So,
they would have to
you
get
could,
that?
well, that's the other part, that if you wanted to do kind of a grandfathering compliance thing, that those that are currently non-conforming, i.e. they don't have the parking spaces, they're in the wrong type of house or whatever, then if they're currently non-conforming and you want them to be able to continue operating, you could allow them as a continuing non-conforming use.
and I think there's the distinction between grandfathering.
Not amortize them.
And amortizing, is with, even if making them come and get a permit isn't a grandfather, right? Because they're still having to do something,
Because
Right.
and we're giving them a period to do that something in. Because grandfathering would just be letting them continue operating.
Yeah, well, that's what they did the last time, and there's no use in that.
And then
We still have the same people still don't comply. So grandfathering is just,
Great.
Well, if we made a good faith effort to say, we would have let you do it, and you didn't take us up on it, now we're telling you you can't do it. That would, so if we're giving them all the rope to hang themselves with,
Kind of, don't we wanna take the word grandfathering off
yeah.
of that topic? And am I the only one that doesn't understand what amortization, I understand it in accounting,
that's why I know that was my first.
but I don't
Giving
understand
a
what,
timeframe to come into compliance.
It's the grandfathered in homes.
I understand what it means, but I think we can change. If you sent me that, I'd be like, what?
Is that a
may be a good
industry standard?
we
I
can
agree.
find a late term for it, it's just
Yeah.
when we talk about code changes like this, that's the term.
That's your
But would I use that when I'm talking to my parents? Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay, so go
He's like
back,
Donald Trump, he just makes up words.
Oh, okay, yeah.
okay, so go back to make sure I understand what we're talking about. What is this, what were we just discussing, the,
Grandfathering in,
No,
amortization.
they're already grandfathered. We're gonna do away with grandfathering.
Doing away with grandfathering.
Right, we're good.
Okay, but no, you're talking about
Requiring them to apply for permits within 60 days and approval of that permit within X months.
1
And
year.
I'm assuming maybe 12, I
And,
don't know.
and start paying their
Yeah.
transient tax immediately.
Business immediately.
Okay, but you were talking about if they don't have enough off-street parking, what was that term that you used?
Non-conforming.
Non-conforming.
So So the question, so for example, I am fairly certain there are vacation rentals here across the street that are in apartments. They're not a single-family home, so they don't meet the definition. As far as I can tell, they've been doing that for quite a long time. Again, we haven't had complaints, so we haven't done the investigation. But do we want operators like that that appear to be in existence already and can show us that as part of their materials?
Okay, first question number one is, are they already paying the TLT?
Yeah, that's part of why we know they're there.
You think they are paying it?
So they're illegally operating, but we're still saying, well,
Well, they're illegally based on the zoning codes,
based on the,
not necessarily the tax.
So this goes back to, is it good, when it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. We said we don't want them in those areas. Now you're saying, but we already have them.
I'm saying they exist, we have not taken enforcement action.
Okay,
I'm not
so-
saying it's good, I'm just saying it is.
So now we have to go back and have that, because if we're gonna allow them to do it in that zone, then we should allow other people in that zone.
That's not necessarily the case, that's the whole point with non-conforming, so I also don't know when they started. That's the issue that I have with grandfather. I don't, because we have allowed operators, if they existed before 2013, to go, I can't tell who's a bad operator and who's not, because I don't know when they started.
Right.
So, there's no reason for me to necessarily enforce on them, because if they've always been in downtown, they would have been one of the very first ones to start doing it, potentially. So, and I'm not saying we shouldn't take enforcement action, but our policy has been to do that when there's a complaint. There's been no complaints, we haven't investigated it. So, it doesn't, so, it's kind of like a known problem. If we know that there's a 2-hour parking limit, and yet everyone parks there, and we don't do any enforcement,
But I think
it's been allowed to occur.
the decision point is, right now, your proposal requires everybody to apply for the permit, right? Right now, they don't, I don't know this off the top of my head off the map, but like, they probably don't have 2 parking spaces per
they wouldn't be
rental.
accepted.
So therefore, they wouldn't qualify for the type 2. So how does the amortization account for, do they just get their permits revoked if they can't meet the standard?
We amortize ones that can conform.
Or are they grandfathered in and they don't have to meet the standard because
I
they're
would-
pre-existing?
I would argue that the grandfathering and non-conformance are different things.
Okay.
Right. So grandfathering means you just get to continue in perpetuity, i.e., they're not amortized. Non-conforming means you existed previously, you do not meet the current standards, but you are allowed to continue operating, despite not meeting the standards.
So the amortization is up until a certain point. It
That's
amortizes
right,
for 5 years.
that's right. So that is a temporal standard of coming into compliance, but if an existing operator is allowed to
Okay.
be a non-conforming,
X
continued
number of
use, that's, so,
Okay.
if the certain things are never gonna be able to come into.
Right.
You could amortize that non-conforming use too, so I think what the other alternative is to say, maybe they're allowed to continue for longer because their best interest goes away, and so you allow them to find an alternative use for that property if they're not gonna be able to do that one. So you can have it be non-conforming and just continue. You could also amortize it so that maybe they get a longer lead, but if they've always relied on me to vacation rental and we're taking, or whatever, we're taking it away from them, then you want to theoretically give them time to do that.
So,
With that,
Or that would be an option.
how long have we been charging the TLT?
I have no idea.
But they couldn't prove that they've been in existence since 2013 because they paid TLT back in 2013.
It hasn't been looked into, I just don't know.
I think we only keep TLT records for 4 years.
Oh,
I think that's right. Yeah.
would that particular place fall under being able to recategorize itself as more of a hotel?
They chose to.
If they chose to, yes, which would mean they'd still keep operating the same way they always have, but just under.
Or they just become rentals.
I think that property just illustrates the point that,
Yeah.
of just, if a property doesn't meet the standard, and like, they might have the scenario where they can do that, but there could be properties that don't, and so just, how does the process account for those properties that might not have that exit ramp?
So what I hear is trying to accomplish here is to really not go out of our way to put good businesses out of business.
Yeah.
Number one, that we'd like them to conform and make sure they are paying their fees and, taxes And also that they be part of that, communication process between any residents around them in whatever way that helps keep them into a boundary of being responsible business owners. Those are the kind of the categories. And I think that in many ways, if we address it in kind of a wider, open area, we keep from boxing ourselves in.
I'd like to ask a clarifying question, and we're just talking about the vacation rentals that do not have permits, not vacation rentals that aren't paying their TOT.
It's not a permit.
We're just talking about with this specific MRI type, scenario, it's the ones that do not have.
Yeah.
Any or all of them.
I think if you're in violation, well, if you're out of compliance, you're out of compliance.
Well, there are three main things that they need to do to be in full compliance. And so that is a good clarifying question of what is the expectation on what that means? If they have obtained TLT, are they eligible for something? Or do we expect, so this is also part of the decision point you're getting at is someone gonna have, if they've been operating in some circumstance, who's allowed to come into compliance? And if they can't meet some of the criteria, whether it's because they're not in a single-family home, whether it's because they don't have 2 parking spaces, is that acceptable on any level?
Yes,
Not,
I think it is.
It
I
is.
think it
To
is.
me, it is, because I think it would be
Yeah,
a shame for them to be run out of business.
yeah.
It's not,
I
But,
think that's fair.
okay, then, if we allow it in that zone for them, why wouldn't we allow it in that zone for somebody new?
well, and we
No, we
did
did
talk
do-
about that. We did talk about that for the square, Butler Square,
Yeah, we're talking, and they can be a motel.
and they could be a
These
motel.
are not anything
And do
new.
motels have to have,
Not anything new. These are just the ones that are already in operation.
No, I understand, so what I'm saying is if we're gonna make exception for them,
Just them, not newcomers.
Yeah.
Not newcomers.
but
They
hotels
have to
don't
all,
have to have.
they're only allowed to do it
okay, well,
because,
that's my question, I'm trying not to state emphatically, that's what I, but my question is, if we're gonna allow it for them, are we going to allow it for somebody else that might
No,
want to put it in that
we're
zone?
only allowing it for them because they came in during a time when there wasn't a process. They wouldn't,
All right.
and somehow they were, yeah, right?
So one approach, if you wanted to protect their vested interest, which is what I would say you're saying, is they're a business, and so do you give them either say, because you have a vested interest, we'll allow you to continue it as long as you don't stop doing it. If you stop doing it, you can't start again. That's kind of how it typically works.
Okay.
Alternatively, you can just give them a longer exit ramp, where you say, well, you do still have to do it, but because you are operating, because you can't come into compliance, I don't know how that would work with the other compliance requirements.
Why
Yeah.
couldn't they become a hotel? A single.
They could, that's on them, that's like a new endeavor.
Yeah,
Do they, and so that's a more expensive,
But think about a single-family house that has one parking space. I mean, like, I think focusing on this is a unique case that has
Yeah.
unique definitional
well,
impacts.
I like their first solution there.
What?
That we allow them, you've stated again, allow them to be there because they were already there.
Vested interest
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah.
So that would be the
That's what you
continued,
said too, right?
Yeah,
that would be where they get a permit, but because they've already been operating, they can continue as a non-conforming.
Okay, it would be a non-conforming.
But they have to
permit.
get the
Oh.
permit and continue, and pay taxes and do the other stuff,
Right.
just like everybody else does, but they would not have to meet all of the criteria if they've already been operating.
And they also need to be notified at that time that if they ever stop doing it, they
And,
won't be allowed to.
and we
rent.
should probably say in operation prior to, and then we need to give them a time before tonight.
What do you mean? Okay, you lost me.
Because if we start coming up with this and someone says, well, I'm just gonna start operating illegally now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all I have to do is get it in before X period. So
You go
I
tell,
would
tell
suggest-
Dave to start telling his friends that.
it would be, I wouldn't even wanna do a state of the ordinance, because if it takes a couple of months to get it together, and someone says, look, I had a visitor. I would want it to be a date prior to this evening or prior to direction from council.
Sounds good.
you're smart.
Good thing we brought you this way.
we done?
At times.
I do wanna bring back,
Is
I
that?
wanna bring back one more question, because we did say probably in setting up criteria, we would find a way to self-regulate the growth. We did not.
It will self-regulate itself.
I question that highly.
He's
But-
already proof tonight.
I'm not sure that that is proof.
What's that?
What you said was proof that this will self-regulate for
When
the
there's-
growth.
When there's so many of them, they're not making any money, because there's so many of them, so they
yeah,
won't
but
wanna
there-
do it
I've heard
anymore.
that argument for years in regards to the, and I forget the verbiage that you use. Can you say it again for me, Bill? The market, the free market. The problem with that is by the time it becomes recognized, it's way out of control. And so and it will regulate itself over a period of time, but historically, I could name off a dozen different things where that kind of idea has literally killed people in its worst condition. So I think conceptually it's a good idea. All I'm saying, going back to, is the question of, we really have an opportunity to make a conscious decision that really wins both areas.
Well, we can look
And
at
I'm-
it again in 2 years or 3 years before.
Well, again,
We
we're here.
heard you, Don.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm just bringing it up one more time to say,
Yeah.
we thought we would deal with it in other areas and it didn't happen.
Oh, I see.
And that's all I'm saying. So if we wanted to reconsider that, but if I will go, I'm here representing what I think is part of the community.
Yeah.
And if everybody else is saying, no, let's not do it, then that's the way it's gonna go.
I got soundly defeated at city council the other night.
It hurts.
Okay, well, we can still bring this back. So, I mean, the whole cap thing, buffer, that was a big issue. So we could address it again.
You guys did marvelous. I truly feel that to be able to be part of this, I'm impressed. This is my first go around.
Don, everything is a compromise. Nobody ever gets everything they want, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not getting my 8-foot fence.
And if you need a good example of that, we have some people that want to create a cat ordinance. Now, I know for sure that they have 40% of the people on their side.
Catwalk ordinance?
Yes.
Oh.
Well, I've heard
So,
the story behind that. If you heard their story, you would agree.
I don't, yeah.
Okay, so, hold on, guys. We need to try to make, our 2-week date while we're here.
Can we
Or what?
push it? No, that's
No?
the holiday.
It's through the holidays.
No, we're done with-
My daughter's in
No,
town.
no, we're gonna push it until after the 18th of January.
Thank you.
Okay.
I would go with that. Only because I can possibly be here,
Okay.
but I could never promise. If on the night that we're gonna meet, my daughter said, let's go have dinner, you know where I'm going.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be in
I
Texas
think that's
until
a
the
good
18th.
idea. The holidays are getting awful busy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so what,
Thank you.
Clay, okay, there's January, if we're doing it on a Thursday, January 4th?
No, after the 18th.
Why
I'm
after
not
the
coming back until then.
I won't be here by the 18th,
After the 18th?
for 2 or 3 weeks, I'm gonna be in, for sure.
Oh.
When are you gonna be back?
I haven't decided, before the first, kind of a big gap between city council meetings, because January's got 31 days.
Okay.
So by the
So
fifth
the
of
end of
February,
January was
Yeah.
for you.
Wow.
after the end of January.
End of February? Is there any huge urgency?
Well, you guys, I almost feel,
Theoretically, I could be.
when we don't meet, then we get a little bit,
January, yeah.
I thought we did really well.
Well,
Yes,
one of the things, if we're gonna have a big gap, and we feel that a lot of this discussion has occurred tonight, it's been pretty productive, but we
Yeah.
probably need to put it together,
Yeah.
is if you can find a date in January, before that meeting, staff can circulate draft outcomes to the committee members, and we will republish whatever that is as part of the correspondence in the agenda packet. So what we will ask you to do is review that, so that you come to the next meeting prepared to say, did staff get it right? And that'll be the main agenda item, and then you can tweak it. Hopefully David will be able to join us as well, so you guys will have a full committee review. But then, after that, then you you'd have the ability to roll up your recommendation. That work for you since there is a bigger gap.
We don't have.
You could do hybrid, someone could be on Zoom too.
I can be here in January, that's,
Peggy said after the 1st of February.
Well, yeah, or, I could likely be in North Carolina from the 16th.
okay. What if we did it before the 16th?
But I could, well, I could
No,
zoom
that's
in,
not-
but I'll tell you what, it's 6 o'clock here, it's 9 o'clock there, so.
Yeah, that
If you
does,
had a 4 o'clock meeting,
Yeah.
I could make it work.
I
And-
guess
I've
I
done
just,
one, but it was,
I feel a little pressure to get something figured out, you
Yeah,
know,
I
for
kinda
the
feel
community.
that,
And when we kind of space it out, it kind of gives the feeling that it's not, I mean, I would like to be a productive group and kind of get this solved.
is the week of the 8th through the 12th out for everybody of January?
January,
Yeah, it's out for me.
well, I could Zoom on those days, I could be here for those, and I could Zoom any other time.
And you're leaving on the 16th, you said?
17th or 18th, one of those two.
And what about the 15th or 16th? Would that be out
Although
for?
it's a night flight, so I could do, well, you guys can't do these. What was your other date, Don?
After January 5th, I'm available, and I can go in February all the way out there. I was just,
the 18th.
We could Zoom.
Is this, you said you're completely unavailable until the
Well, just out of state,
out of state?
until after the 18th, I think I fly back.
I was gonna say Monday the 15th would be, I mean,
Wait,
city
wait.
council's on the 16th.
Hold on.
Oh, that's why it's on the 16th.
I know, we never get Monday holidays.
Disregard,
Oh,
There's a reason.
there's a reason.
in the 16th.
MLK Day?
MLK Day, MLK?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, Martin Luther.
it was on a Monday.
It sounded like the first week of February is the first
The 15th.
opportunity.
Okay, so do we want February 1st?
You fine?
I can do that.
What about the Thursday, the 11th? January.
Oh, we have the commission.
What about the 10th?
January?
When do you leave, Beth?
I don't get back, I fly back in, I think, on the 8th. But it could be the 14th, I'm asking my husband. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
We
understandable.
changed it.
And I would rather have everybody in person. For a person who's trying to do Zoom and then they're trying to read the audience and hear everybody, it's,
We could meet early in the day on the 16th.
Oh, hold on, let me check, let me call my husband. Not on our calendar, I have no idea why. When do we get back from Texas? No, when do we get back to Oregon from Texas?
We adjourn the meeting?
Is it the
We have
16th
to
or the
keep
14th?
this.
It'd be better if we kept the meeting open to figure out when we're meeting
16th,
next.
okay,
Okay.
all right, I'll check with you, bye.
Well, if we fly out on the 17th, it's gonna be a nice, it's a red eye. So I could do a meeting late afternoon on the 17th.
Why don't we just
She
do
gets
it
back on the 16th.
I get back on the 16th. So the 17th is, we could do afternoon, you could do 4 o'clock.
We
Like
have
7, but yeah.
something, okay,
That work for you guys?
wait a second.
works for me.
January 17th,
Yeah.
we're supposed to be at the Allison for a taste thing at 7.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we have a.
I'm telling you, the first week of February is where we're gonna be.
Okay, if you don't mind the delay, I just feel like we lose steam, but that's okay.
I mean, we could meet at 4 and then be done by 6, so we could go home and get changed for the Allison event.
works for me.
Yeah.
I can do
On
all
the
day
17th.
on the 17th.
I like-
We could even come in earlier, I mean,
I have to, well, I guess my son could
it's a
read.
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
yeah, I got nothing.
Wanna do 3?
Okay.
3 o'clock?
If that works for you guys,
I
if you're
just
the
have-
ones with the other appointment.
That's at the Allison at 7, so that gives you even more time.
Wear the jackets, they're ordering jackets
Cute.
for us.
So it's not evening gown.
I haven't heard of Sam Upset yet.
And so we're doing three?
Rachel asked.
Are we meeting at three?
Oh, shoot, I didn't know it was jacket for.
Yeah.
Can you guys do it?
Yes.
Can you guys do it?
Okay,
Laughing
yeah, what are you
on the
laughing at?
17.
Is this
Okay.
room
Okay.
available?
That's PM, by the way, not
3
AM.
p.m. on January 17th.
There is a design review planning.
There's not.
He just canceled it.
We got a lot done.
Okay, good, thank you, guys.
What day are we looking at?
Throw that wrench in.
17th, 3 o'clock,
January.
yes.
Right.
Anything else? Are we, everybody's good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned at 8:05.